Very well. We continue with the debate on the amendment to P96, Senator Mesick's amendment to his own proposition. Next listed to speak is Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. I was moved to speak when I heard the Minister speak in the previous session. He referred to the fact that within the next 8 years, the housing requirements that are identified in the objective assessment of housing needs will be fulfilled. Sir, the crisis in housing is now, and I am deeply concerned that if we wait for those houses or homes to be delivered within the next 8 years, they may not be required because there will not simply be enough people left. I do not say that lightly, sir, but what really concerns me, and I think Senator Mesick very eloquently described the current situation, and we all hear from a high number of constituents who are experiencing housing stress in one way or another. And what troubles me, and I think it's clear it troubles Senator Mesick and many other members of the Assembly also, is that if we continue to see young families in particular, but people with the skills that we need to deliver our core services, particularly health and education, if they continue to experience the problems that they are experiencing in our housing market, then they will simply leave. And that is a major problem, because if we cannot maintain a good and strong community, which is one of our immense strengths in the island, and if we cannot deliver the key services that we are to deliver to maintain our community and to provide benefits for all who live here, then what do we have left to offer? So, sir, I find Senator Mesick's proposition and amendment particularly interesting, and a very valid argument to put forward, because he is trying to resolve a problem. But unfortunately, the plans that would fall into this are also a number of years down the line, as it does not ultimately deal with the crisis that we are facing today. So, sir, he has in fact prompted me to have some interesting thoughts over the lunchtime period, and I hope to be able to bring forward an amendment to the government plan that might assist in this area. But unfortunately, I do not find, after deep reflection and also some correspondence with some of the bodies involved in this proposition, I do not find that I can support it at the 50%. It's with some regret that I say that, but firstly, it is because it does not alleviate the initial problem, and secondly, as the Housing Minister has identified, over a period of time, then needs will be met. But what we do not need to do is impact on public finances to a greater extent. I say that because obviously the Treasury Minister has identified the potential losses that could be incurred. Initially, I thought, well, fine, so perhaps it is the role and the duty of government to meet those losses, to resolve this crisis in our housing sector. But what we need is an emergency plan. We need to identify sites where family homes can be delivered in very quick order. There are opportunities and solutions that are available. There are eco homes that can be delivered within a 13 week period. So what we need to do as an Assembly is to come together to focus, identify where those sites might be, and actually deliver for the families who are, with deepest of regrets, as the Senator identified, considering looking elsewhere to find a home and a place to bring up their children away from their family and away from their beloved island. So, sir, I do agree that there needs to be a clearer priority from government, and hopefully next year that will be achieved. But, sir, I hope in the interim, this Assembly can pull together and help to resolve the immediate crisis that we have. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the proposition? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I speak after all of the previous speakers to raise a few points. So I want to remind people, and I'll be slightly critical of Senator Mezek, say he's only asking for 50% affordable homes. That still means that 50% of these homes are not affordable on the scale. And we have an emergency crisis of affordable homes on this island. And so I'm not going to get in a semantic argument, which seems to have been diverted to. If I was, I'd use Susie Dent's word of the day today, sir, which was so ironic that appeared on Twitter, which was, I think you pronounce it struthius. It's an 18th century word, means resembling an ostrich. And it means avoiding reality or pretending it doesn't exist. And it seems to be a very suitable word for the way in which we're addressing the housing crisis on this island. Mm-hmm. And when the housing minister, sir, talks about these schemes, it was a rather convoluted list of schemes, which appear to me to not be dealing with the basic issue that we have, that the homes that we are making on States of Jersey land through a States of Jersey Development Corporation, where we are the shareholder, are not affordable for the vast majority of people on this island. And so that's not just the poorest on this island who may struggle. It's for, as you move up those people, those young professionals, and I know so many. So I was just walking back to the Assembly. I saw somebody, it was a friend of my son's actually, who went to university with him. And he's back on the island, and he mentioned about the previous debate and what move forward it was. And he said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh yes, it's a housing debate now." And his words to me, and he doesn't mind me saying this, I won't give you his name, were, "Well, I'm stuck with my parents for the rest of my life, it seems." And that is a reality of somebody who's gone off island, educated themselves, taken the time to do that, is highly qualified, will have earning potential in everybody's definition of it, but still has absolutely no chance of gaining an affordable home. And what we will do in this Assembly is we will sit here and intellectualize our way around not building homes that are affordable for our population. Now let's simplify this debate. If we accepted the 15% affordable, that means 85% of the homes being built on that site are not affordable. 85% not affordable. And you can come up with as many schemes as you want, but to be quite frank, sir, I'm looking at those schemes and I have a serious concern about some of them. We're asking young families and young couples and young people to mortgage themselves up to the hilt, the actual hilt, in order to just find a home that they can have some sort of security in. So it's somewhat reminiscent of the subprime market in the US that blew itself up. What are we doing? And this is a very unique island with unique challenges. And those challenges that we face will not be solved with UK type systems, because we have a limited housing supply and we have a very specific need for skills, for services, and a moral responsibility. Let's remind the Assembly of the moral responsibility we have that people can have homes on this island. I would quite like my children to live in Jersey so that if we ever get grandchildren, I'm close to them. But that is totally unrealistic for them. And I'm extremely proud of them because they're incredibly well qualified. But it's not the reality for their lives. But I digress a little bit from the things I was going to say. Although this leads me actually nicely into the part that talks about the market that we have here has failed so many people. It is a skewed market. And if we just take our housing stock from Jersey-owned land and throw it into that market, it will not make the situation any better. And so what we've seemed to be getting here is an argument of delay. It will be delayed, the money will go. So it's the same principle that I have, and I don't know what has happened, but I'm obviously, sir, something's gone wrong because I haven't run the premium bonds for the last 12 months in a row, because I should have, in the same way that this money should be coming from these housing. It doesn't exist. But obviously I'm going to use the same principle, and I'd like to know from the premium bonds people where my money is, because I've had those premium bonds. I should have won by now. It seems to be exactly the same principle that the government's using on its housing. And if you think it's ludicrous, then yes, it's a ludicrous approach. And so we need to actually address these issues. So it is clear that the government intends, from its suggestions of a proposition and an amendment, that all housing stock will only be 15% affordable housing. And I think we need to bear that in mind, because the underlying principle there is 85% of what we build will not be affordable for people on this island. And I'd like to ask the question, who is going to buy this housing stock? Okay, we've done something about overseas buyers because it's a flying freehold, but that's the only reason, because the rule itself about overseas buyers has not come into, has not been worked on yet. We got that from the Chief Minister the other day in questioning. So it's not there. And so who will be buying these homes? Will it be speculators, property developers who live on island? Will we get in there, again, amassing the homes that we've built from the States of Jersey Development Corporation into the hands of the few who are wealthy enough to buy home after home after home and then rent out at the inflated prices that people are paying for rents? So there comes a stage when we have to take an action. And what's being offered here by Senator Mezek is an action. And, you know, I unfairly had a guy at the beginning to say it's only 50%. But I understand that compromise position, and I understand the compromise position of not accepting the amendment and giving this assembly the choice, 2 bites of the cherry to do something right now. And I sort of understand Senator Moore's notion that this doesn't address what happens now, but that's not what we're talking about at this moment in time. We are talking about, if you like, salvaging something from this huge development that will happen so that there are affordable homes and there's some hope into the near future for so many people. And I hope she can find a way of supporting this. I think the conflation of this proposition with the island plan needs to be looked at really carefully, because we understand there's complex stuff there, but this is about those homes being built at the waterfront and the other site itself. And so when we say that, well, we can't do anything about this because there are criteria that already be set. So this is what I would call a classically tautological argument. It is circular. The financial assessment is what fixed benchmarks. And therefore, if you only look within those fixed benchmarks, of course you can't do anything. And actually, so I warn the Assembly, there's a real risk there for all of our housing stock if we do that, because we're within those benchmarks. And that's when we will end up with only 15% being affordable for everything that we build. We're allowing this to be created and we can't get out of it. There is a solution. You change the benchmarks. That way you can allow the affordable home housing that you want to allow. That is the whole point, surely, of having control of the States of Jersey Development Corporation. Or are we just producing a private property developer at arm's length to make a bit of cash to regenerate St Helier? I'd like to ask, where has that regeneration money gone for St Helier? From the IFC and so on. Well, you know, I haven't seen it. We haven't got cycleways, we haven't got walkways, we haven't got, some of the pavements are unwalkable, let alone anything else. And so I would like to see that regeneration of St Helier, but these are promises of Jan tomorrow, which never happen. And so I think so what we've got is a very convoluted set of arguments against this proposition that when you actually look at them individually, they do not stack up. And so this Assembly has a very clear choice. It either takes an action today that says, actually, we are going to put our foot down and say 50% of those homes need to be affordable for the residents of Jersey who are struggling, who are in a crisis for their housing situation. Or we say, actually, we'll let it go this time and we'll let it go into the future, and we'll just hope for the best, and we'll come back in a few years' time because, well, we might not be elected next year anyway, so we can just leave it. So that's morally wrong, and we need to make a change now. So I urge people to support the 50% and then support the 50% in the final vote so that we can actually make a change and actually do something about accessible housing on this island and give young people, and not even young people, there are people who are divorced, who are in their 40s, going back to live with their parents, I've heard about. We can't continue this way. And so we create an opportunity by voting for this. So let's not be fooled by the arguments that we hear so often. And let's actually make a change, and let's make the sort of brave decision that we've already made in this assembly, in this sitting, and let's make this sitting one that is really notable for the future of the people of Jersey. I urge you to support this proposition, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I expect only to speak once during this debate on the amendment and the proposition. I'd first of all like to state publicly what I said in the Teams chat to members following Senator Messick's opening speech. I congratulated him for his speech, which I thought encapsulated the problem, and the personal accounts he read out echoed the comments that I too have received from islanders. I felt it was the best speech he's given in the Assembly since he was elected to do it. When I stood for the States in 2008, I wrote in my manifesto that I was disillusioned with the government of the day for their failures, one of which was housing. I said that it wasn't acceptable that our children had to live with their parents, even into adulthood, or were being forced to leave the island in order to be able to afford to rent or buy a flat or house and to be able to raise a family. But what's happened since then? Next to nothing. If anything, it's gotten worse. And I'm sorry, Chief Minister and Treasury Minister, we do have a housing crisis, not just a problem. And I'm sorry you do not recognise it and have not made it a higher priority. You're not the only government to have failed. All the previous administrations have done so. But I had hoped for better from you and that you would have at least glanced the boil. I'm also disappointed with the States Assembly as a whole, which has a large majority of members who are property owners and landlords and who have a vested interest in the rising rents and house prices, which may benefit them, but not the majority of islanders. Nor have we addressed the problem we have with houses and flats that are seen as investments rather than homes. People think it's great that housing prices are going up. They're not. If you come to sell your property, unless you leave the island, what are you going to get? Probably very little, because the prices are still going up and you'll end up paying just as much to get another property. We have wealthy people inside and outside this island who are buying up the existing housing stock and driving up prices and making them unaffordable to the majority of people who have to work in ordinary jobs to earn an income to support their families. Our situation is a crisis and it needs to be addressed. Now, one thing that hasn't really been mentioned is population, and population is the elephant in the room. The policy is still being kicked down the road, and we'll still not have a policy before the next election. And unless we come to grips with population, we will never solve the housing problem, as demand will always outstrip supply. So in addition to dealing with housing seen as an investment where quick gains can be made, and if we don't deal with population, those two aspects of the problem, we will never solve the problem. I would also like to say a few things about the States of Jersey Development Company. I've been a critic of this body for quite some time. We pay the directors of this company bonuses for what they do. And for the benefit of members who weren't here in the States when they were created, the states handed over the assets to them for nothing. And in a recent briefing, we were advised by SOJDC that they value the land, I think it's South Hill and the waterfront, at £100 million. Well, remember, that's £100 million of our money. But I do wonder whether we should instead, in fact, I felt it was wrong at the beginning. Why have our own development company? Why not do we not zone the land for particular purposes and sell it to developers and get that £100 million and put it into the in the infrastructure that they say they're providing us. I just find it absolutely amazing that we have this body, and to my mind, I just look at it, I think, who's benefiting? I haven't seen the return, as Deputy Ward said. I do see the bonuses the directors get. Is that in the best interest of the island? I'm not convinced. Anyway, I'll just say in conclusion, Senator Mesick's proposition is flawed. However, I'll take it as the best opportunity we have for our children to be able to get some homes in the near term. And I have always supported policies to try and get housing, affordable housing, whatever that is, as we've discussed many a time. And I'll support any other propositions coming forward if they achieve that end. Anyway, sir, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to start by applauding Senator Mesick for bringing this amendment. It's one that the Progress Party had thought about itself, but it's one that we both support. Our view is that for the foreseeable future, we really believe that all state-owned sites need to be used for affordable homes. We had a respondent in the JP only a few days ago saying that, and I think we have got to get our heads around the fact that we are not providing affordable homes in the numbers and quantities that we need to. And from what I've seen of what's been stated around sites that are going to be freed up, I absolutely agree with Senator Moore. It could be too late. Do we need to do better? And I'm not talking about just government, I'm talking about the states generally. Absolutely, because we've been letting down families for some considerable time. We need more affordable homes. It's not just in the rental sector, it's also in the to buy sector. Young families need homes. They need them at a price that they can afford. And we really need to understand how big the problem is. It is whichever way you look at it, we are in a housing crisis. If this government doesn't understand this, then it's out of touch with the majority of islanders. I speak to dozens of people every day in all sorts of walks of life, and all I get is concerns about their children or how they're going to pay the rent. And we really need to get a grip with this issue, not in 3 years' time or 4 years' time, but we need to get a grip of it now. Many may say, well, taking that stance aligns us with reform. Well, frankly, if it does, then so be it. Because like reform, we know that it's going to impact on other social issues if we do not get our heads around how we're going to deal with this problem. Inequality and the issues of inequality are only going to get greater. They will have an effect on children. There are dozens, if not hundreds of families where parents are working 2 jobs. Now that can't be good for family life. That can't be good for children. It must be putting a stress on those families. And a lot of that is around the stress is on paying rent and paying mortgages. And I'm going to come on to mortgages in a second. Population's been mentioned, and there is a lack of data on what's going on in the housing market. I hope the census may help that to some degree, but we do need to have better data in government in regards to what's happening, where people are, how many people are leaving, how many people are coming in. But on the people leaving front, it's been mentioned that people are leaving. I know of people that have decided that this island's too expensive for them, and there is no hope for their children in terms of either renting or even, buying is almost out of people's reach now, never mind in the future. And they are making a choice to leave the island. Some of them are skilled professionals and they are leaving. I met one only a week or so ago on the railway walk, somebody I've known for 30 years that's decided that the best future for him and his family are in the north of England, where property prices are half what they are here. And he feels it's got a better future for his family. Now, that's not what I want to hear from people and from people that have got skills that we desperately need. I've just said that we really need to face facts and realise there is a crisis. Viability's been mentioned several times. I've got no beef with the States Jersey Development Company. Some may have, but they are a housing provider. They are providing housing for the public of Jersey. Now, if they're not providing what we need, and I think it's pretty clear we need more affordable housing, then either change their reference or provide the sites to Andium or another housing provider to provide homes. But they've got to start thinking about, and it's our responsibility to ensure that arm's length bodies such as the SOJDC are providing what we need. The increase in open market prices are just completely unsustainable. The current prices are, I mean, I see prices on a housing estate where my daughter lives have gone up in a matter of 18 months, from £500,000 to £700,000. That is just not sustainable. I'm hearing of young families who are taking out mortgages, borrowing £300,000, £400,000, £500,000. That's jaw-dropping, and it's going to put young people under all sorts of financial stress. And again, it'll put pressure on families, the sort of pressure that is just, they may feel they're doing the right thing for their families when they're taking out mortgages of that size. And I do hope that things don't worsen economically here in the island, and where they could end up in negative equity or not being able to afford their mortgages. But that's a risk we take here at the current time. I'm just going to finish on one issue, and the Treasury Minister mentions that if we accept this amendment or even taking it to a 30% affordable, that there'll be a cash loss for government and SOJDC. Well, what about the social loss? We've got to start thinking about, if we do not provide enough affordable homes, what loss there will be socially to this island, in terms of not just those that leave, but those that will refuse to come and work here because housing is too expensive. She used a phrase, South Hill may never happen. Well, if that's the case, then maybe we should take the site away from SOJDC and maybe we should give it to another provider who will provide affordable homes. It will be a cost to government, but I'm afraid we're at a point where we are going to have to subsidise affordable homes for people, be it through shared equity schemes or whatever mechanisms we need to do. But we've got to give people hope that they can afford homes here and not drive them away. So I am going to vote for this, and I'm also going to vote for the if this doesn't get through, for the 30%. But 15%, frankly, is laughable. And if we can't do better than that, then I do wonder what we're doing in this assembly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. When I first read the amendment to the amendment, I thought it was laughable, sir. I mean, it's one paragraph that says we must make affordable homes in some shape or form, and 50% is better than 30%. But the laughable bit, sir, is financial and manpower implications, because there are no financial or manpower implications. But the Senator knows, sir, that these plans have been worked on and worked on. He knows they're nearly ready to go. And I know the Senator is not that naive to turn them back around and say, go back to the drawing board, will cost you nothing and won't be a delay. That doesn't help your case when you're trying to sell this, does it? And again, what is affordable? What is affordable? We heard the Senator tell us some really sad stories. I know these people. I live with these people. I live with these people in social housing. Senator Pallett has just said, let's be innovative. Let's find some shared equity. Did nobody read the comments? Did nobody listen to the housing minister? Literally, 35% is going to be, sorry, 15% is going to be shared equity. You can buy half of the building. You've got 25 years to buy the rest, sir. So that young man who the senator was talking about, who's managed to save up a few, I think he said 100,000, or one has been saving up for 6 months. These schemes are ready and waiting to go for them. And then there's 35% off plan. This is affordable, and I can assure you, 4 or 5 of my children, mid-20s, bought at Westmount on these schemes, single young men and women. They're in them now. That was affordable. They all come from social housing. They lived at home with mum, paid a few £100 over their deposit, put a bit down, and now they're in them, and their mortgage is no more than what they were paying on their deposit. That's affordable, and these are homes. These are people I know, sir. These are ready to go. Then there's 20% for the right sizing. And if you turn it on your head, there's only 30% that's going to be on the open market. 30%. But let's not worry about that. Let's rip that out today when there's people who've got their £2,000 hot in their hand, waiting for the advertising. They can go down and put that down. There it is. I can afford that. And if they can't, the whole family are clubbed together because they will find £2,000. And then they can pay over the next years. It isn't tomorrow. I know we've come up with some different schemes now, but tomorrow is when they're waiting to put their money down. And the shared equity. Senator Pallett just said, let's come up with something innovative like shared equity. It's here, Senator. But no, support reform. Support money. I think what Deputy Ward said, it's ludicrous to spend money you never had. It's like me, I should go back to the lottery and say, you didn't give me my prize this week. But no, this is money that we may not get a loan from the banks to build these companies. And then if you don't get the extra money, what you want to build? Lots and lots and lots of lovely tower blocks, no nice open spaces for the people who are living down there, no park, no green, no trees, just affordable blocks. If anyone has ever been to Tottenham, you want to go to Broadwater Farm, I can kid you not, it housed a lot of people, but it's the most ugliest place you've ever been to, sir. I really can't understand. This scheme is ready to go. If you really believe none of the financial, you know, we went out, who did we go out to get some financial advice from? Oh, yeah, somebody who might know what they're talking about, sir. But no, let's forget that because they wrote the report with a, I think Senator Mesic said, with a result in mind. And that was so he couldn't get this through. And he couldn't say that he is addressing the housing crisis. I can assure you, sir, I read it. I know the people he talks about. I live with the people he talks about. And they are wanting to get their foot on the ladder. And this scheme, as it is, does it. Affordable down the road or not being built won't help them. I really, really ask people to reread what is in the scheme. It can be delivered. The plans are there. They're ready to go. And if you stop this, be 100% sure that there is someone out there to step up and lend this money. So something will be built. And if you're not, there'll be another white elephant down the waterfront for another 10 years, and you've helped nobody because you think affordable is something that Senator Mesic says it is, and that must make it right. Sorry, sir. Please don't support the 50. Don't support the 30. Let us get on. Let the people who've got the money ready to go give it across and get that foot on the ladder, and they will do it. I've never seen so proud youngsters who moved into Westmount, their families, they'd never owned in their life before, schemes like that work. They're working on the horizon. I'll get there in a minute as well. So please, please don't do this. It really, really is worth the paper that Senator Mesic wrote it on, half a side of A4 with no financial and manpower implications. I don't live in that world, sir. The real world is it could completely finish the scheme off for the people that he says he wants to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy St Peter. Oh, I beg your pardon. Deputy Morell asked for a point of clarification at the end of your. Do you give way for a point of clarification, Deputy Martin?
Thank you. Yes, sir, it was regarding the financial manpower implications. As I understand it, the financial manpower implications are meant to be those that are on the government or the state assembly. So would the minister clarify that the implications she was talking about are on the SOJDC and not the government or the state assembly?
The financial manpower implications I was talking about that were written on as Senator Mesic's amendment. That's his. Yes. And if Senator Mesic had wanted, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, and maybe if Senator Mesic had wanted the true financial and manpower implications, he would have had to go to the Treasury Minister, who is obliged to give him the real figures. I don't think he asked, sir.
Yeah. Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. The States Jersey Development Company evolved from P73 2010. Now, to paraphrase its remit under that proposition, it is that it invites the JDC to act as a developer of property assets in conjunction with the private sector currently belonging to the public. It is for self-finance developments using its existing assets, and it is to regenerate also the waterfront, basically to be independently financially viable. Now, what we are asking for today is departure from that remit. If for no other reason, the waterfront development would not be financially viable, as is documented in the Council of Ministers report, as presented in this proposition. Even worse, with the 50% amendment. Now, my issue isn't so much on sentiment of the proposition. My work for the last 9 months on the population policy has meant I've met very many people who've submitted to me, and I'm acutely aware of the concerns and the issues that we are facing. I've also publicly said many times, and I've used the acronym FOMO as the modern equivalent of what I believe was what happened in 1987, 88, 89 in the property market in London and the UK, where many, many families were left with negative equity because of the fear of missing out on buying. I'm acutely aware of that as well. That's not my issue. My issue is the fact that we asked the JDC to perform a task in 2010. Now, if we want the JDC to perform a fundamentally different task, in this case, build affordable homes, then we should, as an assembly, change the remit of the JDC and not interfere with the business model we've asked them to deliver upon. Sir, it's like buying a dog and barking yourself. Thank you.
Much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendments? Connétable of St Brelade.
Thank you, sir. There is absolutely no doubt that there is a distinct paucity of affordable homes in Jersey. There is, however, a degree of opacity with regard, in my mind, to the definition of affordable homes, and I just want to outline that in detail in my understanding, and Senator Mesic and his summing up may differ. To my understanding, the definition of affordable house has been determined by the Island Plan, which distinguishes between affordable or Category A and market or Category B housing. However, the Island Plan, which we're working to now, was published 10 years ago in 2011 and structures such as the Affordable Housing Gateway, which determines who is eligible for affordable housing, as well as Andium, which allocates and delivers housing, were neither in place at that time. By law, so the island plan must reference the legal definition of affordable housing as set out in the Planning and Building Law of 2002. Article 4 of the law describes how land is to be designated for particular development or use by the Minister of Environment, who may, of course, include designations for residential accommodation, whether it be accommodation for renting or accommodation for purchase for persons who would otherwise have financial difficulties renting or acquiring residential accommodation in the general market for residential accommodation prevailing in Jersey. That last paragraph, sir, is the defining and analysis of what we see now. The general market has run away and we need to address it by way of supply. We cannot ignore the value of sites, however, sir. South Hill is a valuable site, and we have to ask ourselves whether better value for the affordable provision could not be better provided to the advantage of those desperately in need in other places. I do agree that there needs to be an element of affordable accommodation in every development. Let private developers play their part in our societal need, Mr. Environment Minister, and condition it as part of planning permissions. That, sir, I think is the limit of my contribution to the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Conor. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I would like to bring to members' attention findings 23 from the recent PAC follow-up report on review on estate management. Finding 23, the recommendation by the Controller and Auditor General to undertake a review of the Estates of Jersey Development Company, SOJDC, to establish whether it remains the most appropriate vehicle and operating model to deliver government regeneration objectives in longer term has not been implemented. This has not been implemented for more than a year, when it was different review going on between SOJDC and Jersey Property Holding about what other responsibilities can be handed out. SPAC recommended recommendation 15, and we still didn't receive a response. We're due to receive a response in, I think, tomorrow, that the executive should undertake the review, the purpose and aim of SOJDC in line with CNAG recommendation as a matter of urgency. And follow the Senator Ferguson's speech, which really raised huge concern about who is working for whom. The Estates of Jersey Development Company, as mentioned by previous speakers, received the lands which value in millions. And it might be a case, and it is a case, to use the profit to regenerate St. Helier. But as Deputy Ward said, we haven't seen the funds to regenerate St. Helier. And general, all presentations today from the government make me wonder about the general governance. Like we've heard about St. Xavier, that was announced as the housing site, it might be go also for schools. So we are not sure if it's 100% will be developed for the housing. And I agree with Deputy Higgins on this. The proposition might be flawed. It's not really much, and Deputy Martin said, it's very difficult to prove financially, but because I haven't seen any evidence about the purpose of and objectives of SOJDC currently, after we established it in 2010, 11 years past, we need to know where we are standing. I think just as a matter of principle, I'm planning to support the amendment and the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Must any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Chief Minister.
Yes, sir, thank you. Get my paperwork in hand, sir. I think we've got to try and start at the beginning on here and recognise absolutely that obviously all ministers, the government, and I hope all members share the concerns voiced today around the cost and provision of housing in Jersey. There's no question on that. And as I said in this week's questions about notice, we do have a serious problem in both the supply and cost of housing in our island, but equally we do have a plan. And we are not alone, by the way. So many jurisdictions have rapidly increasing demand and a limited supply, and they've obviously found that has led to a substantial increase in the price of housing. We need to be really, really clear. It's not a problem which is going to be solved overnight. There isn't one with a single quick fix. It's going to require an enormous amount of effort from across a number of different government departments and successive governments to tackle this issue in an organised, effective and deliberate way, taking into account the resources and needs of this island. In other words, it needs cool heads to make sure we get this right. But I think we also need to recognise that actually we have taken steps, taking tangible and meaningful steps to address the cost of housing in Jersey. And that includes proposals to manage demand, such as the new population policy, steps to ban foreign buy-to-lets, which I think we all agree is an area that needs to be addressed, and a moratorium on new share transfer developments to restrict overseas ownership. But equally, and I think in terms of tangible steps, don't forget we have taken measures to increase overall supply. And so, for example, I know I've said this on a number of occasions, we did and we have made progress on the offer strategy. That was 10 years delay, but that's now freeing up sites across the island. By agreeing the hospital site, that is freed up, as we've heard, St Saviour's Hospital, with the ability to provide affordable housing and potentially other community uses. It's a huge site up there. We've heard reference to Llanelli. There are, and those, between the offer side and the estate side, sir, later over the next few days, which is in the timetable that we have laid out in the Housing Action Plan by the present Housing Minister, we will therefore be able to say that identify the sites, that the initial sites actually, that those two measures, i.e. the hospital and the offer strategy, will release, and that's about 1,000 units, sir. There will be new sites and new units becoming available from Ports of Jersey. That's about another 1,000 units in the pipeline. And then, of course, as we know, we've got SOJDC and Andium and the proposed Bridging Island Plan, which is aiming to see the delivery of around 4,000 homes within the next 4 years, which is actually a ratio of 3 to 1, affordable versus open market. And that actually, sir, is the table that Senator Mesic referred to in the Island Plan, which I think was, but anyway, but it's also duplicated on page 5 of our comments. But actually what Senator Mesic didn't mention is the following 5 years, which actually brings that total up, and that is in the table, to just under 7,500 units. And obviously that's under present circumstances. I have to say, I'm sure we would all want to see measures that can increase those number of units. But he basically said also said that insufficient units are planned in response to the extension of the housing gateway eligibility. Well, actually, sir, Andium Supply on its own provides headroom of around 700 units to account for those policy changes, and this was noted in the recent briefing to state members. He also said, sir, that the government was not planning to build enough houses, and I believe he'd actually confused a 10-year housing need projection with a 5-year supply plan. So over the next 10 years, Andium alone are planning to build more than 3,000 affordable homes. That's by 2030, which is more than the housing need, which Senator Mesic quoted as 900 homes for rent and 1,400 for affordable purchase, plus extra rental units when the gateway criteria are expanded. Now, he also referred to what I'll call fantasy figures. And frankly, I think he then entirely confused matters and in essence came up with his own fantasy financial forecast. Now, let's be clear, he did reference, could a 25% retained equity product be offered? Yes, of course it could be. But what that does is actually puts the price up. So SOJDC have been working on a 30% figure. That slimmed a difference between 25% and 30% element of the shared equity is not actually going to make that much difference to the financials of the scheme. So, and actually I'm relaxed about the exact design of a shared equity product. As a matter, in my view, should be left to the housing market professionals, probably not debated on the floor of this assembly without having the right data and the right papers that back that up. What matters is that the scheme is viable, can attract funding, and that we can then get on with building the homes that islanders need. And I think, therefore, sir, I'm going to turn to viability, which is I'm going to obviously address this part of of this amendment, sir. My remarks will also be applied to the main proposition as well. But also, I just want to say that my remarks largely focus just on the waterfront, as that is where the vast majority of the new homes are to be built on. So also to remind members, this isn't about giving SOJDC a kicking for the sake of it. It's not about the future of SOJDC. It's about the proposition in hand, which is about whether it's a 15% or sorry, at least 15%, which is what we had previously agreed. Whether it's going to be no less than 30% affordable housing, or whether it's going to be 50%. Now, it is worth remembering, as I said, that we at the States Assembly agreed under P165 that any scheme must be viable and also deliver public infrastructure and amenities. And that's what is on the table, is one which fits the South West St Helier Master Plan, is aiming to meet the higher standards of development and including, sir, a range of viable uses, good architecture, open spaces and improved connectivity in the wider area. And what I do feel that Senator Mazyk has conveniently overlooked is the fact that money is required to build the scheme. That money has to come from somewhere, and to build the scheme, or the present scheme, will cost over £700 million. Under the present plans, the taxpayer doesn't have to foot that bill at all. And that allows over 1,000 homes to be built and enables taxpayers' money to be spent on other projects and support other existing priorities such as education and mental health, for example. Now, it has taken about 2 years to produce the current scheme, which is fully costed and fully viable. And the waterfront development is not meant to be just a housing estate. It is meant to be a quality destination which rights the wrongs of previous developments in the area. Now, if the Assembly decides to make the decision today to change that, which is perfectly within the gift of the Assembly, it needs to recognise that is likely to stop the scheme from even applying for planning permission for another 2 years, and we'll return to this shortly. And particularly, islanders said they wanted a mixed-use waterfront that was landscape-led and would deliver a destination that would be attractive for islanders, if you like. And it's not quite a mini Cape Town development, but something that islanders will go to as a waterfront development. Now, in my view, the proposals of Senator Mazyk will not resolve the very serious housing problems we face. Instead, they will jeopardise, and I mean jeopardise, the developments in South Hill and South West St Helier, and that could actually reduce the supply of much needed homes over the next few years. So in total, SOJDC are planning to deliver 1,000 housing units on South West St Helier and 153 on South Hill, of which 15% will be sold as shared equity. But don't forget, on top of that, there's a further 35% is targeted at the first-time buyer area, which reflects the recent direct experience of their developments, and that's been achieved by enabling buyers to pay, for example, their deposits during the construction period. So if you like, there's a package around supporting particularly first-time buyers getting their deposits in place over a period of time. 20% is promoted for householder right sizing, and actually only 30% of that, of the whole scheme, will be open market housing for those trading up. And even then, so that does generate a supply further down within the overall market. And that is actually a good mix of tenures, recognising that we need varied mixes and types of housing to satisfy the needs of islanders. And in particular, sir, the provision of first-time buyer units will offer an excellent opportunity for local residents to get onto that property ladder. That's about allowing them to secure their property with a minimal deposit and to pay over time. And that also, sir, in addition to those much needed homes, those developments then form part of wider plans for the regeneration of St Helier. And that's actually where any funds that come out of this, although at the moment they're looking thin, would go back into St Helier. And that's been after significant public consultation, and that, in theory, would be set out in more detail in a planning application if this amendment and if this proposition is rejected, which is due to be submitted in the next few weeks. It is worth definitely considering the public realm, of which is £156 million worth, sir, which we are not paying for, which the scheme is funding. And that's about, yes, moving the leisure centre, it's about community spaces and gardens, it's actually about flood defences for St Helier. Now, that's all without public money, as in direct money coming out of the capital programme being spent, despite the obvious public benefits to everybody else, to all of us. I reiterate, in particular, the SOJTC's current plans include improvements to our seawall and flood protection for St Helier, safeguarding St Helier residents from rising sea levels. And that has all been fully costed as a package with the provisions for shared equity and first-time buyer housing I've mentioned earlier. So to alter that viability of the scheme so substantially would seriously challenge the delivery of that scheme. Focusing particularly on the waterfront, and as we've set out in the comments, an increase to 50% affordable housing on the waterfront will change a fairly thin profit into a net loss of over £400 million. Now that is the prospect, with a prospect of a razor thin margin, even if it's at 30%, or even a massively significant loss, will render that development unviable. That's been verified by the independent cost appraisal, and they've noted the scheme would no longer be financially viable and therefore would constitute an unacceptable risk. And that would effectively scrap the plans in their current form, including the important improvements in St Helier I have just outlined. What that would mean, if the Assembly so decides, that's fine. With the scheme, the plans would therefore need to be withdrawn, the funding revised, the planning application delayed. And that means the delivery of any homes to all on that site will at best be delayed and at worst could prove entirely unviable. What you're then going to ask is, what would removing 1,000 would-be homes from the housing pipeline in the foreseeable future, what that would do to our current problems of housing? Now, one thing I will say, sir, as well, is in my 16 years in this Assembly, one thing I have learnt is that acting as a 49-member planning committee that's delving into the intricacies of development decisions or altering for political reasons proposed projects sometimes creates more issues than we'd actually hoped to solve. So right now, we have before us today plans for 1,000 homes at the waterfront and a further 153 at Snow Hill, only 30% of which are for open market housing, that's for those trading up. To take those off the table, to render those proposals unworkable, will have serious consequences, and that is the impact of both this amendment and the proposition. So in short, sir, this proposition and this amendment and the amendment to it will not deliver any improvement of housing in Jersey. It will not address the challenges we currently face, nor will assist in the delivery of housing supply. It will instead effectively scupper two key developments in St Helier, which are on track to provide much needed homes to local residents and to first-time buyers. Therefore, cannot emphasise enough why I urge members to reject this proposition and this amendment. Thank you.
Much. Chief Minister, do you give way for a point of clarification from the Deputy of St Mary?
Briefly, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I will. Thank you, sir. I will be brief. If I heard him correctly, the Chief Minister referred to release of 2 sites by the Ports of Jersey for building houses. Could you please elaborate on which those sites are?
Sir, there's, as published in the Jersey Evening Post, I'm going to say last year, sir, it might have been earlier this year, Ports are working on an overall scheme which from memory is aiming to deliver, I believe, around 1,000 units, particularly on, I think it's the New North Quay, Elbit, Victoria, that area. It is part of the overall Ports Master Plan, but it does deliver a significant, I think I'm right in the numbers, it's certainly a significant number of units into the schemes. It is obviously not yet been drawn up for planning permission. It is at that master planning stage, sir.
I thank the Minister for his clarification. Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir, and I'll be brief. I've just returned from the IOD lunch where they're encouraging members of the business society to stand in the state. And they had a very interesting panel up there. On it was ex-Senator Frank Walker, Mr. Walker now, and a young man in his year 11 doing economics, geography and history called Ben. Ben was asked directly about his future and asked whether he foresaw himself returning to the island. He said, no, it's unlikely, even though my A levels might fit me for our major industry, for the finance sector, I can't see myself coming back because of the price of houses. Because I wouldn't be able to buy. And that was a year 11. Completely aware, very, very, very good at presentation and very talented, but not returning to the island. Mr. Walker said we must find a way of retaining our young people. And he also said the time has come that we must take actions rather than just words in order to do so. And he had in mind there actually giving people tax breaks to get back to the island, some such. And what I've heard today is merely, especially from our Chief Minister, is reasons not to act. Words, just words that went on for about, I don't know the time I wasn't on, although it is now, went on for at least, I think, 9.5 minutes. But they were just words. Just words about doing nothing, about not intervening in the house. In the government's duty to provide affordable homes, sustainable homes for its population. We are failing to do that, and if we do not accept this amendment today, we are failing again.
Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak on the amendment? Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. As usual this morning, Senator Mezek made an excellent speech, and I think he pressed a lot of buttons. A lot of what he said in pressing those buttons is true. It is a depressing situation for many people as far as the housing situation goes at the moment on the island. But there are bits of his speech that I have difficulties with. First of all, let's have a look, and this was brought up by the Constable St Brelard, I think a few minutes ago. Let's first look at this word affordable. It needs to be ditched as soon as possible. It is in the context of housing here or in Jersey or in New York for that matter, totally erroneous to be used in the concept of housing. Because in reality, there is no property in Jersey that is unaffordable. Otherwise, there'd be £10.5 million properties sitting empty. They've been afforded by someone. It's a case of who things can be afforded to, how affordable they are to the vast population. So affordable generally means nothing. What we are being asked here, and this is why I want to clarify this. I know I got into trouble the other day trying to clarify crisis, but I'm going to try and clarify affordable. I'm nothing if not brave, sir. What we are looking at here, and we're being asked to provide, is subsidised housing. Whether it's subsidising renting, which we do already to quite a substantial degree within our housing estate, or it's subsidising the purchase of properties. And what Senator Mezek says, and he might want to correct me when he sums up, is that he is looking for a substantial amount of subsidised housing. Because if he isn't, and he's really looking at things that can be afforded, even by the vast majority of the population, his proposition actually and his amendment is erroneous, because we're already guaranteeing over 50%, because we've got the shared equity scheme. You've then put the first time buyer scheme into it. That takes you to over 50% anyway of what would be properties that people are going to be able to afford. So as I say, what he's asking for is 50% of subsidised housing, which is fair enough. I just think we need to clarify exactly what he's looking for. He is looking for the taxpayer to subsidise 50% of the houses. And again, as I say, that's fair if that's what people wish to do. Another point, sir, is that he makes out, and I think he should know better because he was housing minister for a couple of years. People might have missed that point in this whole debate, but he misses out and tries to make out that nothing has been done over the last few years. And I'm going to go back maybe 5 years to actually point out there's been a considerable amount done. You only have to go round my own parish, sir, of St Clement, go and look at Lascay and Lamarre, which were an absolute disgrace a few years back. I make no apologies for saying it. They were a disgrace. They would have not been out of place in many inner city areas of the UK. They are now completely unrecognisable thanks to Andium's efforts. They would now not disgrace a very fine private housing estate. The towers there have been completely refurbished, or they're in the process of being completely refurbished. The new Samaray development, sir, and I'm not going to touch on everything that we're doing or have done, but I'm going to go through some of it because we've made out that we've done nothing. The new Samaray development now, sir, has been completed. People are moving in there. Elsewhere, we've got the La Colette low-rise, which was in a terrible state as well. That has been removed and the project to rebuild it is well underway. The Lime, sir, will be commencing shortly. Summerlands is almost complete, and at the early part of next year, people will be moving into these properties, sir. The 3 hotel project, which I like to call it, with the Mayfair of the Revere, the land has been purchased and planning has agreed. These are all Andium affordable homes. Andium have a great project. They will be, I'm reliably informed by them, going to be able to produce 3,000 affordable properties, or let's use the new thing, subsidised properties by 2030. And away from Andium, sir, we have the Lamaz development around by the old Odeon cinema. We have Horizon, that is going to be enormous. That will be coming online. It tops out, I believe, in the next couple of weeks. So that will be coming online in the next 18 months, which again frees up other properties as people will move in there. So it's hardly nothing, is it, sir? That's just a summary. There's other stuff going on. You only look round the island, there are cranes everywhere. So it's hardly nothing. Oh, and let me throw in another one, sir. Hugh Court, completely renovated for key workers. Key workers that people are saying we need to keep in the island. What have we done? We took Hugh Court, completely renovated it for key workers, particularly in the hospital sector. Also, sir, Senator Pallett said the open market property market is ridiculously expensive. He is right. He's 100% right. But how is that going to be helped? How will it be helped, sir, by not building more open market properties? It won't. It'll be made worse. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify a few points there, sir. But now let me just move on to the viability in my role as shareholder representative, because the Minister of Treasury and Resources reminded us earlier, seems a long while ago now, but of the wording of the original propositions and the use of the phrase maintaining the overall viability of the scheme. Conspicuous, sir, by its absence in this proposition and the amendment are the words viable or viability. Perhaps I'm only guessing, but the concept of viability presents the proposer with a difficult truth. So the amendment before us to require SOJDC to incorporate 50% of subsidised housing within these developments renders them economically unviable and in fact loss-making. That's not my conclusion, and it's not SOJDC's conclusion. It's the conclusion of an independent expert firm with vast experience in assessing real estate and infrastructure projects. The proposer may say that the 66.1 million cost figure is ridiculous, and that arguing with the finances is really tenuous, sir, but ideal in economic reality. I'm disappointed that he has not won the Euro Millions last week, sir. Sometimes perhaps if he invested 60 odd £60 million in the purchase of tickets, he may have slightly more success in doing so, because we have to remember that SOJDC are investing and paying the states, or the states are purchasing the property here. It comes with a cost, and that cost needs to be recuperated unless we just give away properties for nothing, which I don't think any states member would do. And I make any states member the offer that I will buy their property for a 75% discount, and that offer holds till 9 o'clock tonight. The independent report, sir, says that if there is 15% shared equity, the returns will be X, but at 50%, there is a loss position of Y. The difference is 66.1 million. That's reality. It's not nonsense and it's not tenuous. The proposer has sought to argue publicly that the cost figures are nonsense. And he references the EuroMillions lottery, but that reference is costs taken together, providing 50% shared equity will result in an overall loss position of 32.5 million for both developments. That's not cost, that is an actual loss. Sir, I would also go so far as to say that the potential lenders to SOJDC also deal in economic reality. So no lender is going to support either development containing 50% shared equity because the numbers just do not work. It's not viable. The proposer may say, sir, that arguing with the finances is tenuous, but I would suggest, sir, that the proposer meets Treasury and Resources under delegated authority, whilst I clearly respect the will of the Assembly. Oh, sorry, sir, I've digressed in my... Yes, sorry, with lenders to hear their views on lending against unviable projects. Some members may question this viability work and point to the level of infrastructure and public realm improvements on the developments. However, what I would say is that these improvements are crucial to the success of these developments. I will say more on this subject in the main debate, sir, but suffice to say for now that islanders want destinations and communities, not bland, impersonal housing estates, particularly on the waterfront. Voting in favour of 50% will effectively force SOJDC to halt their plans for both sites. The SOJDC board will have to give serious consideration to the future of both sites, given the very stark financial implications involved. Further, sir, under P73 2010, approved by the Assembly, ultimately any development that SOJDC propose requires the approval of its shareholder, as represented by myself as Assistant Minister, sir, for Treasury and Resources under delegated authority. Whilst I clearly and always will respect the will of the Assembly in this matter, sir, I am bound by the provisions of P73 2010 and would be unable to approve developments that are demonstrably unviable. So the net effect of all this is that it will delay yet further the delivery of housing stock, something I'm certain, 100% certain, that no one in the Assembly would want. So I want to come back, before I close, to a comment made by the independent reviewer. Increasing the percentage for shared equity creates unacceptable risk. It creates this risk because SOJDC are at such early stages of both developments with high levels of uncertainty in construction costs and sales values. The reviewer concludes that given all these factors, a 15% shared equity scenario achieves the balance of including a proportion of affordable homes or subsidised homes, whilst providing sufficient returns to pay for the infrastructure and public realm improvements. So the proposer can suggest that ministers and officers need to somehow work to continue a more suitable outcome, but I make no apology for repeating the fundamental point. The economic reality is that 50% shared equity renders the developments unviable. They will not be supported by lenders, and therefore there is the very real risk that the sites will remain undeveloped, possibly for the indefinite future, but certainly for some time until we can resolve some other way forward. So as will be emphasised during this debate, and has been indeed, the government is taking housing accessibility on Ireland seriously, very seriously. There are tangible signs that sites are being released, as I hope I explained earlier, and that construction is progressing with earnest. As I said, you only have to drive around and look at the cranes to see that, sir. I would urge members not to ignore the bare economic facts. 50% share equity equals 0 homes delivered on South Hill and the waterfront for some time to come. Please reject this amendment, allow SOJDC to continue delivery of a waterfront of which we can be proud, and give people shared equity housing and first-time buyer housing there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And it's actually just to ask the proposer a question, which is just, and I may have missed it in this original proposition speech, but just to understand his view on shared equity and whether he sees that as affordable housing or not. Maybe I've missed it in his actual proposition. I'm not sure, but I'd be grateful if he could explain his view on whether shared equity is affordable housing or not. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Gorst.
Thank you, sir. We all use different vocabulary, and there's been conversation about vocabulary. Perhaps some of that was driven by the mover of this proposition and amendments request for the Assembly to declare a housing crisis earlier this year. Some have said that it's a housing challenge, some have said it's a housing crisis, some have said it's a housing emergency. So it's not just occurred overnight. I went into the last election, however many years ago that feels now, sir, proposing a housing commission to make progress on what I thought then, and it was clear to many, was a housing crisis. And if we are honest with ourselves, what has happened during the recent year is that crisis has got worse. And we have now the former housing minister bringing forward a proposal on these developments. We also have a new housing minister outlining the actions that he is taking to deal with this housing crisis. But deal with it we must, because the experiences of islanders that Senator Mezek read out to us at the moving of this proposition are very real. And they are experiences that, for my part, individuals have been speaking to me about, as I know they have, to every state member. And I said this when previously Senator Mezek brought forward proposals that we should, and I said then, allow the new housing minister to pick up the baton, take seriously this crisis, and come forward with, and I hate to use this word in these terms, so with concrete proposals. Hopefully we'll use less concrete in the future, sir, because we know of the environmental impact of producing concrete, but with real deliverable proposals. And it's tempting in the face of a crisis, it's tempting to come forward with ideas, and for those ideas to look as though we're taking action. It makes everyone feel a little bit better that we've done something. But the problem I have with what Senator Mezek is asking us to do is what the implications of this doing by pressing our buttons today to say yes to 50% is that in the short term, and probably the medium term, it will reduce the supply of affordable or shared equity homes. And I don't say that, sir, because I'm a boring accountant. Of course I am. Goes without saying. I say it because, quite simply, looking at the evidence, if members support the 50% today, the development will go back to the drawing board. That may be the action that some members wish to see arising out of this amendment. But we will be sending an indication to the public that we're taking this crisis seriously, when by the way that we vote has the very opposite effect of taking it seriously. And I, for one, sir, want to take it seriously, and I expect my ministerial colleagues to come forward, as they are doing. We have seen even during this week that housing can be built at St Saviour's Hospital, that housing can be built at the old Lekeneve school site, and even that, sir, is being challenged, and was challenged around the council ministers' table. But we have to come together, commit ourselves to dealing with this crisis, and take real, tangible actions that will make a difference. Because right now, it is affecting islanders' lives. It's affecting the hope that our young people have for a future in this community that they love. And we, every one of us, all 49 of us, we owe it to each islander to stop pointing the finger, stop being petty, stop criticising each other, and work together to address this crisis. Because that's what a crisis means, sir. It means we stop playing politics with it and we come forward with real, tangible proposals that make a difference. This one doesn't, sir. Perhaps the original proposition of Senator Mezek, where he talks about 30%, we're going to have a debate on that in a some short while, perhaps. But for my part, that potentially will deliver in helping to take a step towards taking this crisis seriously. So I ask members to think very, very carefully before they accept what on the surface seems like a terribly good amendment. But as soon as you scratch the surface, it has the opposite effect of starting to deal with this crisis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak on the amendment, then I close the debate and call upon Senator Mezek to respond.
Thank you, sir. And can I thank those members who've taken part in this debate. I guess I'm going to start with a slightly jovial point here, and I promise that I will make this relevant, sir. is to say that there's actually a film coming out in a few weeks' time, which I am terribly excited to go and see. It is in fact the new Spider-Man film, Spider-Man No Way Home, which is generating a lot of hype at the moment because the previous installments were particularly good. And we're all very excited about this next film because the premise of it involves Spider-Man inadvertently opening up portals into alternative universes, and through those portals emerge the protagonists of the film, and the adventure is of Spider-Man having to defeat these baddies who emerge through these portals from alternative universes. And listening to Deputy Martin's speech, I'm wondering if she'll be having a cameo appearance in this film, because it's abundantly clear that she inhabits one of these alternative universes. It is certainly not this universe in which she is based. And I don't want to dedicate much time in addressing the points she made in her speech, not least because all of them were preemptively addressed in my opening speech. The only thing I will say to her is, please carry on, keep going with speeches like that. I would thoroughly encourage her to do that, because I think most people out there will regard that as being completely out of touch with the reality, and to essentially suggest that there is no real problem out there and people can buy homes if they want, does not match the lived experience of so many young people, not just those whose testimonies I read out earlier in this debate, but anyone else who might be paying some attention to this debate, and others on the housing crisis, as we've had in recent months and will continue to have in the upcoming months as well. I think what I want to dedicate the bulk of my closing speech to is the arguments which were again promoted by the Treasury Minister in her speech, which I have to say sounded like a speech which she had not amended to take into account the statements which I made in my opening speech, where I went through the arguments that are presented in her comments paper and demonstrated why I think they're flawed arguments. And I was interested to know if there would be a further rebuttal to that by the Treasury Minister, and there was none. So the independent financial assessment that the government provided was based on benchmarks. That is clear in the text of that financial assessment, which is attached as an appendix to the Treasury Minister's comments. The very last page of it, page 8, 23 of the comments, but page 8 of the financial assessment, Appendix B, assumptions, and it lists what those assumptions are, and you go through them. Some of them are quite clearly non-negotiable, but some of them are negotiable. And there are other benchmarks which are set out in the rest of the document before. And I repeat what those are. Those benchmarks are keeping the plans exactly as they are. They are setting the shared equity percentage at 30% for some reason, and it is expecting the full market value of the land returned from the SOJDC. All of those are voluntary. The government, if it wanted to, could amend those benchmarks or to set different assumptions for an independent financial assessor to look at and work out is viable. Instead, what they've presented us with is a done deal for which they say they cannot move from, and therefore the conclusions of that review are unequivocal and no amount of revisiting the work will change those fundamentals. And that last sentence there is a direct quote from the Treasury Minister's speech. The conclusions of that review are unequivocal. No amount of revisiting the work will change these fundamentals. Sir, that is wrong. A revisit of that work could change those fundamentals because it is in the gift of the government to change those benchmarks. And so I say to those members who have been persuaded by those by that financial assessment and who remain unpersuaded by me that the government has done exactly what it intended to with that, it will have managed to have won over some votes against this, by putting what looks like a credible document in front of them. Members are often extremely busy and focused on other very important items and won't necessarily have all the background knowledge or time to consider to dig deeper and scratch beneath the surface on these assessments. But I have done that and have discovered that it is faulty. Those assumptions underpinning it didn't need to be assumptions, and there could have been other ways around this. So I beg members, don't take this financial assessment as unequivocal as the Treasury Minister asked to, because it just isn't. We can and could have done better on that if different assumptions had been set. So I'm going to say that the speech I was most disappointed with in this was the speech from Senator Moore. Senator Moore and I don't always agree. We have stood diametrically opposed on some issues in this term of office and have been firm allies on other causes as well. And I listened to a lot of what she said, but I simply found her conclusion to be perplexing. She accepts that there's a crisis. She accepts that drastic action is needed to address it. Unlike some members who say there's a crisis, Senator Moore, when she says a crisis, at least she can say that she has voted in support of propositions aimed at addressing that crisis in the past. There are some members who say there's a crisis and have never voted for anything to try to address that crisis. So she's in, I think, an intellectually stronger position in saying that. But she says that she can't support it because it doesn't alleviate the housing problem now, and that there are other things that can be done. And I have to say, sir, that sounds like what Deputy Ward referred to as jam tomorrow. If there are other sites to look at, which there undoubtedly are, and lots of those have been mentioned in this debate, whether it's Philip Lefevre House, whether it's St Saviour's Hospital, the Kennebec School, etc. Those are all to be dealt with in the future as well. So how can you argue against supporting this proposition because it doesn't alleviate the housing problem now, and instead say we need to look at other sites when all of those other sites are to be determined in the future too? I would say that actually we have an opportunity to have a strong impact in the supply of affordable housing on two very specific sites. One that is to begin not that far in the future, and one that's to begin several years into the future. We can set the groundwork now for providing a greater supply of affordable housing if we choose to. And that should be done not instead of these other sites, but in addition to these other sites. I've been saying for years now, and I made the case around the Council of Ministers table, that St Saviour's Hospital should have been freed up for housing a long time ago, and that it was ridiculous that it was ever off the table because of the hospital project. I thought that was ridiculous. I told ministers that I thought that was ridiculous, and I had ministers say to me, actually we agree with you, but we just need to go through this process. And well, great, that process has lost us about 1.5 years worth of time where we could have been taking quicker action to deliver housing there. So let's not see this as either or, let's see those as in addition to. And I make the point that if it does come to a point where we exceed the need for social rental housing and affordable purchase housing, good. Wouldn't it be a good thing to provide an oversupply of housing for those sectors? Because if you provide an oversupply there, you can then widen the criteria for who's eligible even further, and that then puts extra pressure on the open market sector to be more reasonable in their expectations on prices as well. To provide more luxury housing in the housing market puts pressure in a much less effective place in terms of affecting prices. So I thought Senator Moore's reason for not supporting this was strange, although we are in the debate on the amendment rather than the main proposition itself. And if she can't bring herself to vote for 50% and find some of the arguments from the Treasury Minister persuasive, I say, OK, fine. That's why I've also proposed a compromise of 30%. So I hope she can at least be persuaded to go for the 30%. The Deputy of St Peter as well made a point, and in fairness, other members alluded to this point as well. He said that we shouldn't give the SOJDC a task and then interfere with it afterwards. And he referred to the propositions setting up the SOJDC from, I can't remember if it was 2010 or 2011. He said we shouldn't give the SOJDC a task and then interfere with it. Well, sir, I didn't give the SOJDC a task because I wasn't around back in 2010. And as times change, as situations evolve, it's down to elected politicians not to be bound by the decisions of previous parliaments that made decisions on the basis of the facts as they were at the time, but to exercise our judgment based on what we know the challenges are now. And if it is the case that the parameters that have been set for the SOJDC and how they work are not fit for purpose anymore, then change it. The government has the right to do that. This Parliament has the right to introduce new laws and repeal old ones if we want to. Don't feel bound by a decision made 10 years ago that's no longer relevant. That is a really poor argument for saying that we just have to live with whatever the SOJDC comes up with because of a decision made by our predecessors. No, that's not how democracy works. Councillor St Brelard made a point that I have had put to me by others as well, and I treat this point as one that's made with honest and good intentions, and it's the point made about couldn't we use the revenue from sites like the waterfront or the South Hill to provide better value elsewhere, provide more affordable housing elsewhere. And I totally understand where he and others are coming from, and I understand why that point is made. But I think it misunderstands what the real challenge is in providing affordable housing now. The challenge is not in finding the funding to build affordable housing. Just look at Andium. They don't struggle to get the funding. They borrow it. They've done so through the government up until now, but are now also looking at private loans as well to do that. The housing trusts as well. Some of them have gotten private loans to be able to undertake some fantastic projects, like the redevelopment of Troy Court being one very good example of that. You can acquire the funding, you can borrow it. The problem is not acquiring the funding to build affordable housing. The problem is finding the space to build it. So why would you give up good space to provide affordable housing to get money from it that you actually don't need to provide housing elsewhere, and with which a big chunk of would simply go to be purchasing the land, probably at market value, which then takes off ends up being a big chunk of the cost of delivering those homes, where you could have done it for free on land you already owned. So sir, I think that misunderstands the best way of providing affordable housing. And to those who disagree with me and say, no, that is what we should be doing, I would say to them, OK, but you've got to be better in outlining how much affordable housing elsewhere you think you can fund through these projects. If it's the case that in having 100 open market sales on South Hill would end up raising the money to build 100 affordable homes elsewhere, tell us what those numbers are, because I think if you take into account the cost of land elsewhere, it won't actually be that many. And if you can't demonstrate that it is actually better value to do it that way, then I don't think you should argue that that is the right way forward. So Deputy Ash, the Assistant Treasury Minister, spoke later on in the debate to mop up some of the arguments that had been made beforehand. And he said, when talking about looking at the taxpayer subsidising homes, he said Senator Mezek may want to correct me, and he's absolutely right. Senator Mezek does want to correct him because he's talking nonsense here. We're not talking about subsidised homes here, and he's wrong for two reasons. Firstly, Andiam Homes provides a net subsidy to government, not the other way round, and he should know that as the shareholder representative, that Andiam Homes provides a financial return to the Treasury of about £30 million every year, and the combined subsidy that's provided to their tenants through the income support system is only about 17 or 18 million pounds, which means, so them providing 30 million return, but their tenants only getting subsidised by about 18 million, means that they're in effect providing a £12 million subsidy back to government, which is not ring-fenced for housing. So it's not right to say that we're subsidising social housing. It's actually the other way around. And there's arguments to be had about whether that's right or not. But in what I'm proposing here, I'm not arguing for subsidised housing as well. I am not suggesting that anybody should be paying the mortgages for these homes, apart from the people who are set to own them. They should pay their own mortgages. It shouldn't be taxpayer paying the mortgage for them, but they just won't be paying a mortgage for the entire property because a proportion of it will be held back as shared equity owned by the SOJDC, and that enables those purchasers to acquire the right to own most of the property and live in the property for a lower than market value that way. That's how you make it affordable for them. But they don't, when they eventually move on and sell the property, they don't get the full value back. The full value stays with the SOJDC. So it's not subsidising them because they don't ever get the full value for it. And it's not really a cost to the SOJDC. OK, they never get to realise the value of that proportion of the home that they continue to own, but they do still own it. It is still theirs. So it's not right to say it's taxpayers subsidising homes for other people, one group of people in need subsidising another group of people in need, even though they don't themselves personally benefit from it. That's just not how it works. Deputy Morell asked, do I see shared equity as affordable? And he can correct me if I don't properly address this question, but I'll try to do so as best as I can. The definition of affordable housing is something that's very difficult to agree on and be satisfied with. For the purposes of propositions like this, the definition of affordable housing that I'm going by is homes which are allocated to people who are on the affordable housing gateway. So we have an affordable housing gateway. There's criteria you have to meet before you can be on it, either for social rent or for affordable purchase. And it's for those homes to be allocated through that process. So if the criteria are widened in the future, then that obviously makes more people eligible for it. Andiam's Home Buy goes through part of the gateway as well, and they do that by retaining a share of ownership in those properties as well. So yes, I do see shared equity as a way of making homes affordable, but it's still got to go through the gateway because we then retain control over the policy there. So Senator Gorst did a very good speech, and he I noted that he made his comments in such a way that didn't rule out him supporting 30% rather than 50%. So I won't be too cruel to him in responding to his arguments. I hope that he left that hint there for a reason. He did say, though, that we need to stop playing politics with this issue and come together to find a solution for it. And when politicians or commentators make that point about any particular political issue, it normally gets a good round of applause and foot stomping. Yes, stop playing politics and just come together to solve it. But so it's difficult to do that when people fundamentally disagree on what the approach is for solving these issues. So there are some people who think that the way we will solve the housing crisis is to take our hands completely off the wheel and let the free market deal with it. And there are others who say that approach doesn't work. You need strong government intervention to be able to resolve issues like this. And if people fundamentally disagree on that point, there isn't a lot of common ground for them to work on when it comes to solving it. I'm of the view that the approach that's been taken so far hasn't worked. Therefore, a different approach is needed, and that approach should be the government providing a large amount of affordable housing to meet that demand. And so that approach, as a philosophical approach, was actually agreed during Senator Gorse's time as Chief Minister in previous iterations of the Island Plan, where originally there'd been a suggestion that the private sector would be providing affordable housing through the H3 policy, and when that was scrapped, it was turned into using government sites to deliver affordable housing using Andium and etc. That was a policy that came into formation when he was Chief Minister, and here we are with the government-owned land, a government-owned developer not sticking to that principle and saying actually we should be delivering the open market homes that otherwise the open market is actually already delivering. So I think that seems inconsistent, and actually what we've been doing up until this point, whilst there have been some great successes like the improvements in the quality of social rental homes in particular, there are still real pressures that are having a seriously detrimental impact on people's lives, and convincing people like the young man that Deputy Southern referred to from the IOD events today, who very frankly is able to say, I don't envisage I'll continue to live in Jersey into my adulthood because of the cost of housing. So, sir, we do still technically have obviously the main debate on this to go. I think that we should set our ambitions high. I think that we should be aiming to get as much affordable housing on these publicly owned sites as possible to meet the need that there so desperately is, and that needs to be met as soon as possible. This is not instead of any other project. This is in addition to any other project as well, because the more we can do, the more people we can help, the more we can alleviate that crisis. I think 50% is feasible. I think the financial assessment that has determined that it's not feasible was flawed, and it was flawed because it was destined to be flawed by the assumptions and the benchmarks that were set in the first instance. The Treasury Minister's comments say that the government will respect the decision of the States Assembly one way or not here, and of course it's constitutionally obliged to. I think that these comments that the site will simply lie in ruins for years and nothing will end up being done and it jeopardizes its viability entirely, I think that's just blackmail, to be honest, sir. That actually a government can choose to treat these issues seriously, can choose to follow some alternative. In the case of South Hill, that's easy to do because you already have the basis of a planning application. That planning application has been through plenty of changes in the last few months itself before being submitted. It's not too late for it to be changed again. Planning themselves may delay that if they choose to have a say in it and oppose parts of that. The idea of delaying the waterfront one is absolutely ridiculous. It's years into the future now, and that one there is loads of time to deal with some of these issues, and it's entirely possible that it can be interfered with by the next government if they feel that there's a response at the election next year by the public saying actually we want a second look at this. Like, all of these things are perfectly feasible, so I simply don't accept that. So I think we should aim for 50% on this, and I urge members to support this amendment. If, however, they can't bring themselves to do that because they are just a little bit too nervous about such a high proportion meeting that target, then I say to them, you do still have the option to go for 30%, which is doubling the ambition that the government have set. And let's not forget that the ambition that the government have set of 15% is derisory, and it has really the public reaction I've seen in response to it has been laughed at. They've laughed at this ambition because it is so minuscule. And I do note, sir, that in the government press release we got about using the old Le Kennevet school site and St Saviour's Hospital for housing. I looked very carefully at the words there. There wasn't actually any words in there saying that those will be affordable housing. So we can't take these things for granted. I urge members to support 50% and support this amendment. I accept that there'll be some who'll be a bit too nervous to do that, and if that is the case, fine. 30% would at least be progress, so we can debate that next as well. But I think we should be as ambitious as we possibly can, which is why I proposed this amendment separately rather than taking it as amended. Sir, having addressed what I think are the main arguments there, I close my speech and I call for the appel.
As called for, I ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. Ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been defeated. 15 votes pour, 24 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 3 votes pour and 4 votes contre in the chat. Very well, we now resume the debate on the proposition.
I'm sorry, the vote please, the contra and the abstention.
There are no abstention, but the contra votes.
Yes, sir. I was puzzled by WM appearing. It said abstention. I thought someone had abstained. I'd like the contra vote though, please.
Yes, contra votes.
Those members voting contra in the chat: Deputy Masson, Deputy Pinnell, Senator Moore, the Deputy of Trinity, and those voting contra in the link: the Connétable of Grouville, Deputy Labby, Deputy Ayer, Connétable St. One, Senator Lafondre, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Martin, Connétable St. Brillard, the Deputy of St. Peter, Senator Gorst, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Lehegera, Connétable St. Clement, Deputy Ash, Deputy of Grouville, Connétable Trinity, Deputy Morell, Senator Farnham, Deputy of St Mary, Connétable St Martin, Deputy Guida, Connétable St Peter, the Deputy of St One, and Deputy Lewis.
Very well, we now resume the Deputy Young asks for the pour to be read out as well, please.
So those members voting in the link pour: Deputy Pamplin, Senator Valois, Senator Pallett, Connétable St John, Deputy Young, Deputy Alves, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Gardner, Senator Mesick, the Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Ward, Deputy Southern, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Taddeo, and the Deputy of St John. And in the chat, the Conotab of St Lawrence, Senator Ferguson, and the Conotab of St Mary.
Well, we now resume the debate on the main proposition, P96, and the proposition has been proposed and seconded. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? What if Deputy Young?
Thank you, sir. I want to put on the record, I voted for the amendment because of the principle of the current island plan policy, as Senator Mesic reminded of us in his closing remarks, that it remains the island plan principle. It may well have been set during the previous council of ministers, but as we speak now, the planning record requires the primacy of the use of state-owned land, which is developed for housing, for affordable housing processes. And as the minister responsible for that planning system, I am not prepared to resign from that whilst that remains a policy. I think also that's particularly important given the uncertainty, which again, I think Senator Mesic and other members spoke of, in what will be the outcome if the draft bridging island plan, which we're in the middle of processes. I think I'd just like to say one or two other things. I won't speak at length because I did last time. And I think what I want, the debate on behalf of the SOJDC, I believe has treated the waterfront scheme, a scheme which is by all records, which is planned for a period of 2026 to 31, i.e. 5 years to 10 years time. It's not now. Treated it as a done deal, with the model of validity being can't be cast in stone. Sorry, viability, it cast in stone, it can't be changed. Yet, of course, as Senator Mesic reminded us, there's a general election, and it's absolutely right and proper that such that the brief for that scheme will need to change and flex according to the future. There's many circumstances that will do that. I think my concern about the arguments for SOJDC, all of them that we've heard today, is that they all fail to recognise that none of these schemes yet has been through the planning processes. In fact, the large one hasn't even started it. So in the waterfront, there's no application. The inquiry, which I've said will be held, has not yet happened. There's been no attempt to put planning obligation agreements in there, nor has there been a supplementary planning guidance issued by the minister on the opportunity site for that site. So all of those are things that the planning process will provide for. None of them, I think the arguments put forward, none of those recognise the planning system even as a role. And of course, also we've heard it came as kind of a rabbit out of the hat, really. It came out to me because I wasn't aware of it. The St Saviour's Hospital and the Le Quennevay site being earmarked for homes. We don't know if they're affordable homes or what, but of course, those are the statements, and of course, neither of those have been through the planning process. In fact, it actually discounts the fact that there are current amendments in the island plan to the contrary on the issue of St Saviour's, which are still going through the planning process. So I think I would just want to say, I think in all these decisions about the use of state-owned land, it's really important in future that the planning process is given due weight. It is the way in which the public has a voice in all these developments, and the system is designed to respond to what the public comments on matters through consultation process, as well as what the government wants. And of course, it's true that whatever changes take place in the waterfront system,
alternative funding mechanisms are available in order to be able to achieve the public domain goods, which everybody has an aspiration for. But I think the issue of what is the relative role of those yields compared with those alternative infrastructure and public assets, I think really is a matter for the future. And I don't believe that we should cast that in stone today. And I have to say, I'm afraid that process did disappoint me. I think it reminded me when we set up SOJDC, well, it wasn't me, there was arguments that the SOJDC should be allowed to operate just like the development agencies do in the UK, whereby they are exempted from planning processes. And perhaps in the future, if that's the view of the way people see things, then that's a matter that people should consider. I wouldn't support it. I think it's really important that due process applies. I favour a stronger intervention myself because I think relying on the private sector alone, I think it's failed. The whole history of H5 and the way that policy failed, but we'll be talking about the Island Plan demonstrates that. So I think the issue of South Hill, I've explained the fact I feel difficulty about that. It can, that is very late in the day for a change, but nonetheless, I feel it is possible for that scheme to be adapted or changed, and I don't necessarily buy in at the moment to this issue of this massive delay. Perhaps we've had this debate too late. I think that's honest truth, and I do share actually with what the Minister of Housing said, Deputy Russell Labby, that personally I did think this was too valuable site, and I'd always favour it being developed for public asset purposes, an arts or culture centre or a hotel, but of course none of that is possible given the post-pandemic situation we've arrived at. And of course the planning guidance for South Hill did make those as a possible use, but obviously the SOJDC responded to the markets and what RSG asked them to do, which of course the planning minister, well, is not a member of and has no input whatsoever. So with that being so, I'm going to certainly support the substantive proposition. I hope it gets through. I was encouraged at what Senator Gorse had to say. It doesn't surprise me that 50% probably is a step too far for other members, but I think, frankly, 30% is really, I think, absolutely relatively modest. And frankly, we should just get on and pass this, and it sends the right signal to the public that there is hope. Thank you, sir.
I saw Deputy Morale.
Thank you, Mum. I am minded to support 30% original proposition, and really I'm asking a member of the government, whichever is the most suitable, to challenging might be a bit too strong a word, asking them to explain precisely why this is a bad idea. And I know they'll think they've already said this, but the reason I rejected the 50% because I think it doesn't work financially. It doesn't stack up. But using the independent report that the government commissioned to look at the 30-50% scenarios on the South Hill, this is my reasoning now. The South Hill development shows that there would be an 11% return for JDC at completion if the 30% shared equity went ahead. Now, whilst the report then says ordinarily developers would expect a 15 to 25% return, and they then go on to say that the 11% return is a level which threatens the viability of the development and is not a commercially acceptable proposition. It just strikes me that 11% is only 4% away from 15. And I know this is millions of pounds we're talking about here, but it's fairly close is what I'm saying. And that because the JDC is not a wholly commercial company in the sense that it is owned by government and therefore it is underwritten by government, it has a safety net which private developers just do not have. It strikes me that the difference between 11% and 15% is the sort of difference that is suitably, effectively underwritten by government. It's something that JADC could put up with in a way that a private developer wouldn't. And so when I think about that 11% return, it's still a positive 11% return for JDC, for SOJDC. Government is available if necessary, and preferably not necessary, but it is available to help if needed, if the return should in fact turn negative. I suppose, Mum, what I'm trying to say is 11% still seems a sufficient return to me. There are plenty of businesses which operate on far less returns. And so that's the South Hill. And so that's how I look at the South Hill development and think, well, yes, I appreciate it's tight, but it's supported by government and it would deliver 30% of shared equity. Then you turn to the waterfront. Now, the big difference between the waterfront and South Hill is that South Hill is, as has been said, a project that is much closer to completion. I know it hasn't started yet, but it's actually much further down the line than the waterfront. And that's why where the independent report shows that there would actually be a loss on the current view of the waterfront development, or actually they're saying there'd be a 9% return to the JDC, and they're saying that that's not enough. The point here is that the waterfront is very much, and I think Senator Mezek referred to this, it's not gone very far so far, the waterfront development. It's still very much up in the air. And so there can be a large amount of changing the waterfront development to accommodate the 30% shared equity. It could be less public realm. That may be the way forward. It could be that there are other, in fact, you increase the amount of commercial space. We also, something which isn't often discussed, and I'm afraid when I look at Deputy Young, is one of the things I think is missing in the island plan. There's a lack of employment land in this island. And so actually one way of helping achieve that 30% shared equity target is to increase the amount of commercial space there, which would help provide greater returns and allow 30% to go to shared equity. And so that's the way I'm reading this at the moment, that yes, it becomes perhaps more uncomfortable for SOJDC at 30%, but it doesn't become impossible in a way that I feel that 50% had pushed it too far. And, you know, I know that the housing minister really is focused on trying to deal with the housing crisis. And I appreciate his efforts so far. And I was listening to him closely. But I do wonder if this is something we can achieve, that we could move to that 30% level for these two developments. And my reasoning, which is probably flawed, but is still my reasoning, is there. And I do put that challenge to the relevant minister. Explain to me why the waterfront can't be rejigged, for want of a better word, because it's still a long way from even planning applications, and why an 11% return isn't enough for SOJDC on the South Hill development. So unless I hear strong reasons as to why that's not viable, I am minded to support the main proposition on this. Thank you, sir.
Point Harbison, John.
Thank you, sir. Like Deputy Southern and many other members, I too was at the IOD debate at lunchtime, and I'd just like to correct Deputy Southern on one thing. The young man's name, I think, was Henry rather than Ben, and he stole the show. The key thing there being that a lot of discussion was about encouraging youngsters to return to the island once they'd got their education and gained experience off island, and also to try and encourage youngsters to stay here. Senator Gorst almost persuaded me to vote against the amendment. I say almost, but when he confirmed my view that there is a housing crisis, I was persuaded by him to support the amendment, because I believe there is a crisis and we have to take action. I applaud his comments about working together. Let's get on and do it. And how are we going to do it? How are we going to think out of the box? This is one way of doing something positive, practical, to make things change.
the Ports of Jersey land was mentioned earlier. Well, yesterday we heard about the success of the cannabis industry, and I can tell members that that success is having a real impact on warehousing space on the island. The demand for warehousing space has gone up. There's already not enough warehousing around the harbour, so it's going to take some time to free up the warehousing to provide the houses in and around the harbour. We also heard at the debate at lunchtime about the ALOs as being part of the solution to implement change. But here we've got Ports of Jersey going to be providing houses, Andium providing houses, and SOJDC providing houses. The Controller and Auditor General in a recent report identified that there were some 51 annual reports from ALO organisations that we have currently on the island. It really is time for us to streamline and actually look at the articles of association and see whether we can get some of these groups amalgamated and going forward. So like Deputy Young, sir, I hope that members will support this proposition. Thank you.
Deputy Pinnell.
Thank you, sir. I was trying to get the camera to work. There we go. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record, any scheme, whether it be 30%, not just 50% of shared equity, creates an unacceptable financial risk for these developments. Through this debate, the Council of Ministers comments and the members' briefing held on the 11th of November, ministers will and have demonstrated that there is a steady pipeline of developments being completed in construction and in the planning phase. All of this demonstrates the action this government is taking to address the housing needs of all islanders, and the pipeline demonstrates that supply is and will meet future project demand. To that end, I have to ask why stipulate that SOJDC must increase its affordable housing on, for example, the waterfront, when the first phase is only scheduled for delivery in 2027, with other phases years after that. If the housing need is so critical now, and I'm not saying it isn't or it is, increasingly shared equity on the waterfront will only have a real effect a decade from now. Rather, I would choose to focus on the good work that the Minister for Housing and Communities has done after just a few months in office, and the tangible progress being made right now on increasing supply. So a vote for this proposition will simply mean the developments will, at best, be significantly delayed. At worst, just not progressed. We will therefore delay the delivery of all the housing, open market and affordable, as well as the public realm improvements and the progress and work undertaken over the last few years. Senator Mesic, in his summing up, was criticising the financial information. I can only reiterate DSW, the firm who reviewed the business cases for both developments, are completely independent. They were asked to independently assess the impact of an increase from 50% shared equity on both sides and significantly on the viability. No steer was given whatsoever. No one in Treasury or any other area of government influenced their conclusions. Clear conclusions were that 50% is loss-making overall. 30% is far too tight to be viable and would create unacceptable financial risk. JDC would not be able to negotiate borrowing on such a business case as it's not viable. Environment Minister Development's brief for South Hill did not include affordable housing. His guidance reference this being a high value site for open market housing. I would urge members not to forget the viability test of the proposer's own proposition P165 and P69. The viability test has not been met to justify an increase to 30%. We have to reject this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson.
Yes, I'm here, sir. Sorry.
Not at all.
I really have to consider whether is government the best agent for undertaking commercial business? And I think the record of governments across the world for getting into commercial developments is absolutely execrable. I'm dubious about the ability of SOJDC to adopt a revised business model. I think members should remember that for years SOJDC has received bonuses based on a theoretical increase in value of the properties held, on paper only, not on an actual profit on sales. As I recall, we could have sold the first waterfront site to Dandara for 12 million. Instead, we actually made a profit of 7 million. After the original profit, as calculated, was found to be erroneously reported at 11 million. You know, that's quite a mistake to make in reporting. I really don't feel that government should be involved, trying to involve itself in a commercial development rather than actually delegating it and making a proper profit. It really is quite ridiculous. I will support this 30% because I think the arguments being made by Treasury are somewhat fallacious. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. And just following on from Senator Ferguson about the suitability of government to be involved in commercial activity, and I'm remembering back some time, sir, to the Waterfront Enterprise Board, and then the plans to bring private developers in to develop some of the land and provide the facilities, housing infrastructure that we needed, and the heavy criticism the Assembly got at that time, sir, for not actually seizing the commercial opportunities themselves and putting the profits from that to good use. So the good senator suggests we're not good at being commercial, yet I think this proposition is saying we're being too good at being commercial, and perhaps we should put another need first, sir. But I do agree, it's always about a balance. And this government, this Council of Ministers, as I'm sure every member in this Assembly, is absolutely determined to resolve the housing problems. So there's short-term problems, long-term, medium-term and long-term. They all need dealing with. There's no one quick fix. And we do have effective and considered plans in place, finally, to deliver the housing we urgently need, future generations urgently need. The plans are in place. The Bridging Island plan will deliver over 4,000 homes by 2025, including, as we know, sir, 1,500 homes through the Gateway, which is an 80% increase in housing startups, or starts, if we can refer to them in that, and it exceeds the needs projected in the housing assessment need, the objective housing assessment needs, I think it's called, sir. We're delivering measures to manage demand, including developing new migration controls and population policy, which will limit migration, and moratorium on share transfer. And we're working now, sir, right now, to better understand the immediate population impacts of Brexit and COVID, sir, which I believe are significant. And we have a good plan, sir, the Creating Better Homes Action Plan from the new Housing Minister, delivering effective coordination. At last, sir, we've got some effective coordination. New Housing Minister is making a difference in support of all of these actions, which is crucial, sir, to improving housing affordability. Our pressing challenges with housing affordability cannot be solved overnight. We know that. We need effective long-term solutions based on plans that are data-led, properly developed plans, costed, funded, and realistic, sir, that will deliver the solutions we need, as well as a minimum of 15% on their sites. Estates of Jersey Development Company will deliver, we've heard, sir, but I want to impress some points, so I'm sorry for a little bit of repetition, a further 35% targeted at first-time buyer, 20% for household right sizing, and of course 30% will be open market for those trading up or down, I suppose, sir. This is a good mix of tenures and meets the island's diverse housing needs, which is essential to supply and pricing stability, sir. And of course, as we create new homes, as people right size or move up or down or change, it frees up other homes, sir, for immediate occupation or for development and improvement. Of course, so the waterfront and South Hill properties will not be available for buy-to-let investors. Local home owners will receive priority at all times. I think the Chief Minister brought this up, sir, in the debate on the amendment. The waterfront site includes 150, the site proposals include £156 million of public realm and infrastructure, including, sir, leisure centre, expansive public realm, open and community spaces, landscape gardens, children's play parks, as well as significant sea defences and necessary improvements, very necessary improvements to the sea defences and other important infrastructure at no cost to the taxpayer. And Deputy Morell, sir, rightly mentioned that there could be some savings to be had there, sir, and there might be. We could actually reduce the infrastructure and the public realm about these areas. But of course, meanwhile, there's parallel debates going on about how important it is to surround our housing with proper facilities, proper amenities, the right public realm, gardens. And of course, we mustn't forget that if we reduce the cost or the profit of the scheme, or the ability, the financial ability of the scheme to invest in the essential infrastructure that we need, we're still going to need it. It's still going to come from somewhere, so the cost will be transferred from the potential profit on the housing developments to the taxpayer. So, if this proposition is passed, the financial viability of the scheme is undermined, it's compromised, and an increase in the proportion of housing to 30%, as we've heard, is estimated to cost over £28 million. At 30%, so the return on the scheme, which requires a huge investment, is just 5.4 million, which is insufficient. I wish it wasn't. I really wish we could deliver this 30, 40, 50% and deliver the returns we need to make it happen. But the banks, sir, will not lend given the levels of risk and the returns on the size of the project we're talking about. It actually will compromise it, regrettably. The proposition is agreed. The planning application for South Hill will have to be withdrawn, and the planning application for the waterfront will not be submitted this year as originally planned, sir. Now, there have to be new consultation, new plans drawn up, And of course, the planning requirements mean there has to be significant consultation to do that. So actually, it will cause delays, and we can't afford to delay the delivery of over 1,000 units of housing. If we do, it will only intensify the housing situation, sir, for islanders needing homes. We are bringing forward as well, so the Housing Minister is bringing forward more suitable sites for homes and affordable housing, which will deliver. They deliver exactly that. Having made 2 big decisions recently on both the hospital site and Le Caneve, we're now able to free up St Saviour's and Le Caneve schools to deliver over 300 homes potentially with amenities. And of course, Deputy Gardner raised the issues of schools and so forth, and that all has to be considered and paid for. And there's more announcements to come, sir. The Housing Minister is on this, sir, as I've seen no other Housing Minister for some time. There is a determination there, sir, that I think is going to deliver if we all get behind it. And he's going to publish more sites as soon as possible to ensure the commitment to the housing delivery, sir. After 20 years, more than 20 years with short break in the middle, and being the father of 2 adult children, that makes sense. And after all of my professional career in business and politics, there's not a lot now, sir, at my age that keeps me awake at night, sir. Not the fear anymore of Deputy Southern's questions on productivity or economic recovery or even the new hospital, sir. But this issue does. This is of huge concern. Our priority is to deliver and to build more new homes and keep building until the problem is dealt with. We need to increase the supply across all sectors, sir, of the housing markets. Social, accessible, affordable, shared equity, open markets, sir, if we are to stabilise things and stabilise prices and average pricing to give islanders hope, especially our young islanders and those who go away and want to come back, but can't afford to. We've used a number of words to describe what's going on, from an issue to a problem to a challenge, crisis, emergency. It's all of the above, sir. Problem to some, those of us who are fortunate enough to own our own homes and have done for some time. It's not really a problem for us, sir, but it's a problem for our children and our grandchildren. And it certainly is an emergency for some islanders who need housing. And we have to tackle this. People need homes. They need homes that they can afford to buy or rent and sustain. And despite, sir, the admirable and good intention of the proposition, this is just not the way to achieve it. We could actually delay or reduce the number of homes that are going to be available to islanders in the short to medium term. So I urge members to reject the proposition, sir, and join together to get behind the Housing Minister, his plan, sir, to pass on strong and deliverable foundations to the next government, to the next States Assembly, which will enable them to finish the job and deliver the thousands of new homes in a financially sustainable way that we so urgently need. Thank you, sir.
Will you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Morell?
I will, sir.
Thank you for giving way. It was, I apologise because I was going to ask this of a previous speaker who made the same statement. It's the Senator mentioned that the Bridging Island Plan would deliver a number of homes by 2025. As I understood the Bridging Island Plan, it clears the way for building sites, it clears the way for planning for those homes, but it doesn't actually deliver homes in itself. And I was wondering if the minister could clarify what he meant by the bridging.
Well, perhaps I could revise that to say the Bridging Island Plan will clear the way for over 4,000 new homes by 2025.
Very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the main proposition? No other member? Deputy St. Peter.
Sorry, you didn't hear that. Didn't hear that promise, did you?
I don't think it is the shortest speech of the year, even by now.
I'm going to talk about two things. One, the report suggests that if this amendment is successful, then the JDC will have to return probably by the end of 22 with revised plans. My spies and my best guess says that's going to be 18 months. The other thing is we've already spent £2 million getting to where we are, and I would guess that'll be another £2 million to represent. So that's delay and cost, which is what this government is accused of doing. But this is what this proposition is actually making us do. Delay and cost, 18 months, £4 million, beggars belief.
Deputy Labby.
Thank you. And when I last spoke, I was talking about the infrastructure and the public realm on the planned waterfront side, the parks, the squares, the gardens, the trees, the landscaping. It's landscape led. The cycle paths, the shops, the focus on arts and culture with an art house cinema and artist studios and art galleries, with a focus on health and well-being with 3 swimming pools and a gym, with solving the pinch point just on the Western Gateway opposite the Grand Hotel, where it's difficult for pedestrians and cyclists, by moving the slip, with all the cedar fences as well. And the financial advice that we get is that at 30% assisted purchase, it's unviable. Money has to be found from somewhere. Is there an appetite in the Assembly to borrow money, to borrow more money to fill that shortfall? I don't think so. So we all know what's going to happen, don't we? We're going to have to start picking away at the public realm, at the nice things, the good things, the healthy things, the open green spaces, all that sort of thing that we know we want for St Helens. We're going to have to start picking away at that. We are this scheme is not still up in the air. It is ready to go to planning now. They've just held off because of this debate. And my last conversation with Lee Henry, the CEO, they are ready to go now to planning. It's been 2 years in the making. There was no affordable housing in the housing minister's provision, in his guidance, in his planning guidance. In fact, he specifically says in reference to South Hill that it's a high value asset that should be exploited, or whatever the terminology was. So this will, if I could have accepted the 30%, I would have done. I've lost my social conscience. I agree with virtually everything that the senator said in his summing up on the last debate, and I'll talk about that a bit more. But this will represent a delay. So Senator Moore is right. We do need 3-bedroom houses on the Gateway. The Constable of St Mary's is absolutely right. Affordable housing is a ridiculous term. We should be talking in terms of home buy on the Gateway, which is an artificial construct to allow people to purchase property who otherwise would not be able to do so on the open market. That's the Home Buy Gateway. And then we have assisted purchase products or initiatives like the ones I was talking about in my first speech, with shared equity and the deposit scheme help, and now the empty nesters right to buy assistance. So there will be a delay, and it's such a shame, because if we could have greenlit this today in terms of not accepting these amendments and allowing JOADC to go through the planning process, which can start imminently, there's an opportunity. It'll obviously go to a public planning inquiry, but there's an opportunity. Let's say that takes, let's say the application goes in January, and that process takes 6 or 7 or 8 months. We could be in a we could be in a getting planning permission for it by Q3 2022, and as soon as it gets planning permission, the adverts go out. It's open for people to come in and put their 2,000 down or whatever they can do and start on that deposit scheme, and that will be significant, and it will give over 500 first-time buyers the opportunity to get their foot in the ladder and start the process and begin saving and doing the repayments so that they can put as much deposit down as they possibly can and then get their product. We've got an election as well in the middle of all this. The new assembly might it could get lost, completely lost, and it's in jeopardy. And this is an even more dangerous amendment than the 50%, because it's sort of, oh well, I couldn't go for 50. I'll compromise with the 30, and they'll work out the finances. The scheme is going to suffer. It could be unviable. It has to go back to consultation if we're going to start fiddling around with what's on it. By law, we have to go back to the consultation. That consultation is a credit to the SOJDC, and Lee Henry, the CEO, guards the results of that conversation. He's he guards the results of that process. Every time I bring up something, why don't we go a little bit higher there? We'd have to go back to consultation. That's not in the consultation. That wasn't agreed. And this was a consultation with the people, the community down there, with all the lobby groups, all the pressure groups about heritage and about everything else. They were all consulted. Members of the public, states members had the opportunity to be part of the consultation. I don't know how many of them took that option up. So, we could be in a position. I'm sorry about this, Senator Mezek, and I agree with so much of what you say, but this is destructive. And that's all the information I'm getting. It is potentially destructive. It will result in delay. So instead of, by the end of 2022, getting those people that are on the waiting list and people who want to give this a shot, getting their deposits down and putting their name on the list and then saving to that process, it's going to be 2023 at the end of that at the earliest for that process to go through. So it will just be, Assembly can't have it both ways. They want me to build faster and quicker, and yet they put the brakes on me, allowing brakes on me by putting the schools as a priority over housing earlier this term with Deputy Gardner's proposition. I asked them not to do it, and then I'm saying the best way, the best thing to do, to the compromise we can make for everybody, for the best results, is to let this go through unamended. Let the planning process happen. Keep on track with this development. Then I agree with Senator Moore and Senator Mezek. The next key to unlocking Category A housing lies with, in a big way, lies with St Saviour's, the South Side. I am on record in the Council of Ministers. I hope I'm not saying things that I shouldn't be saying, because a process probably has to happen. But SOJDC tells me if we get the green light with this today, they're going to go ahead with that, and they'd like to concentrate on South Hill and the waterfront. They don't mind if they're not a part of the St Saviour's Hospital development. I have said on Council of Ministers that I believe the lead developer on this should be Andiam Homes, especially under their new chairman, Richard McCarthy, who is fantastic, and they're working so well together, and they've got plans. He went to see it the other day with Ian Garishaw. And immediately they've got ideas for the whole scheme. And that, Richard, the Deputy Ranov tells me, I said, when can we get on to St Saviour's Hospital? He said, the South Side in a year. So that's the best, that's the quickest and best way. Let this progress. let's plan now. Let's use this year to design and build and plan, and the planning process for St Saviour's Hospital to get onto it in 2023, the south side. So the single biggest threat to the ambitions of Andium, the States of Jersey Development Company, and Ports of Jersey, who want to develop accommodation, the single biggest threat to them achieving their goals and their ambitions is us, is the Assembly, is political decisions, political indecisions, political directions, political changes of directions. And we've seen it, haven't we, for nearly 20 years with the waterfront. When was Webb formed? 1995 or 4 or 6, maybe 1996? And still, great swathes of the waterfront lie undeveloped. And how many waterfront blueprints or master plans have we seen in that time as well? They've come and they've gone, like Fort Regent. This is tangible. We can make this happen with over 500 homes for first-time buyers, over 200 homes for right sizes. By the way, in that right sizing scheme, they have to release a home for a family, not investors, for a family. So those empty nesters wanting to leave and come to the waterfront, they have to sell to a family. It's another part of that scheme. So that releases more. And the first-time buyers moving into this will release the properties they're perhaps renting in now. And that is churn in the housing market. And that's what we need. We need to have churn and transitions in the housing market. And I'm afraid Progress are wrong on this. We absolutely must supply the open market too. Otherwise, it will continue to self-inflate. That is what other jurisdictions are doing. We have a terrible problem. We're not alone. It's through the Western world. Guernsey's figures increase in house price index was in double figures from the last quarter. So we can't be complacent. We have to work hard. I'm doing my best, and on government sites too. I know that because I've been there so many times. I know that to give the government a good kicking is a healthy thing and something that we can relish sometimes. But giving the government kicking on this issue is not going to hurt the government. It's going to hurt the people who want to start getting on the waiting lists and paying their deposits, those first-time buyers, because that will give them hope that they're finally getting tangibly on a list and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I urge members, I know it takes to have to do it, because I know this is well-meaning. I urge members to reject this and let me stick to my plan, because it's the quickest possible way of getting new homes built. And it does mean that they're not all Category A homes, but that is important too. Thank you, sir.
Would you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Ward?
Yeah.
So it was when the minister's finished. So if you want to finish, please do. I don't want to interrupt. Are you finished, sir?
Yes, the minister has just finished.
Oh, thanks, sir. I wonder if I could ask the minister. You talk about. I think so. You talk about these homes that are for first-time buyers and get them onto the ladder. Could you give us an indication of the price of a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom flat or accommodation home in the new development, so we can get some idea of what first-time buyers will be paying?
I don't know if those. I do not have that information. I haven't. It hasn't been supplied to me. I honestly don't know. I have not actually spoken in those terms. I don't know if somebody from Treasury knows and could help you later on. I can't tell you. But we really need to be helping SOJDC get on with it, and there's other measures we need to do with them too, in terms of lowering the threshold at which they can start building, and that's coming down the line in a few months.
There's really about the cost of those. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister.
Well, Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. I agree with a lot of what the Housing Minister just said. So the Housing Minister talked about opportunity, he talked about avoiding delay, and he talked about hope. He's absolutely right, but this proposition is an attempt to find an opportunity in which we as the Assembly can give political direction and offer hope to members of our community to resolve a problem that we have in our community that we can see is causing great societal issues. So I understand his argument that supporting this proposition could cause delay to the project, but there is a way around that, and that is if the Assembly will agree to this, and they will agree to it would probably take an amendment to the government plan, but that is still something that has potential in the next 2 days. So we could ensure and that we would provide the SOJDC with the shortfall that they could experience by offering the 30% of affordable homes. That is perfectly within the gift of this Assembly. So rather than standing here and talking about excuses and saying, well, we can offer hope, but we just can't offer a home for another 2 or 3 years, well, why not find a way to offer both homes and a quicker a quicker path to providing those homes in the shortest time frame possible. There are also other methods that we could use to achieve homes for people in a shorter period of time, but that I will leave for another day. I would, however, like to commend the work of the SOJDC to date. In my communication with them today, they have reminded me that 35% of their open market units that have been sold to date on both College Gardens and the Horizon project have been purchased by first-time buyers. And then if they add the 15% of units, they argue they would target 50% of these units to be purchased by first-time buyers. So we can see that there is a will, and they have tried to offer, as the Minister himself acknowledged, the deposit scheme and many other things. But what this offers, this debate is about here today is actually finding a resolution, coming together as an Assembly to say, we acknowledge there's a problem, and here we are as representatives of the people, we can find a solution. Of course, the Treasury will say, but where will we find that shortfall? Well, we do now know that since the debate about the hospital funding scheme, there was a scheme to reduce the cost of the hospital to £620 million, yet the government, the Council of Ministers, decided for whatever reason that they didn't want to amend the amendment to that hospital scheme. But that is within their gift. There is time during the planning process for them to perhaps do that, to create a plan B in the event that the planning scheme is turned down, which is a likelihood. And we know that they do not have a plan B. So they could deliver a different scheme with a more affordable price tag to deliver healthcare, and also at the same time deliver housing for people. So it would be, in my view, a win-win for everybody. Because if I could share with the Assembly at this point, when Scrutiny spent some time on King Street recently asking members of the public what they thought about the government plan, there were really two topics on conversation, and the number one topic that everybody wanted to talk to us about was the cost of the hospital and their concerns. So, sir, there would be a threefold benefit in supporting this amendment today. Not only would it provide hope, not only would it provide a solution for housing, but it could also assist in providing a solution and relieving some of the deeply held concerns there are in our community today about the hospital project as it stands.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So before I start, I want to apologise if, for whatever reason, I'm not responding to other people who have spoken in the debate. I've rejoined the Assembly relatively late today, and I thank members for the courtesy and understanding they've shown me. But I thought it was really important. I wanted to support my colleague, Senator Mezek, who's been a long-standing champion of affordable housing in Jersey. He knows, I think, firsthand, and he's friends with many people in a generation that feel forgotten in the island because they have given up hope of ever perhaps being able to afford to buy their own homes. They might still be clinging on to that. And what kind of island do we live in? And it's not a problem that's unique to Jersey, it's the same in the UK. When people have to compete in order to just be able to rent a property, and you hear about people going to viewings and having to hope that they get there early enough so that their offer is accepted. And at first, when you hear them talking, you're thinking, oh, maybe they've put an offer in to buy a house, but no, they've just put an offer in to be able to live in somebody else's house for a year, if they're lucky, and if they can get their contract renewed for more than a year, to pay an extortionate amount for somebody else's home that will never be theirs. This is the context that we're living in. This is the context which I think Senator Mezek understands, and many of us in this Assembly certainly sympathise with, even if we are lucky enough to be partial homeowners. And so I think that there's a vision there which Senator Mezek has tapped into, which I know that the public has tapped into, and listening to Senator Moore as well, who's been out there doing scrutiny in the street, she will probably be very aware that this is probably the #1 issue in the island, if not, it's very high up there with the public, a public we do want to engage with, and it's something that the public want to engage with us over. Now, if we had to try and explain to somebody who didn't know about Jersey or the States of Jersey Development Company and what it was, and you had to explain to somebody, perhaps a pupil at one of our primary schools or secondary school, or an adult member of the public, and they said, what is this SOJDC? How would we explain to them what SOJDC does? I'd probably start by saying, well, it's a states-owned company, it's entirely states-owned, and they take public land, and in some cases they take public land which has been reclaimed from the sea at very great expense. Not easy to do. It's quite a difficult technical job to do, but it's also expensive. Sometimes you have to clear out the soil because it's been contaminated. It might have been a dump site previously, and we take that very expensive land and they sell it to private investors. They sell it to people who are very rich, and they might have sold it to people off island if they could have. Senator Mezek again put some amendments in there, but it's essentially we transfer public assets into private hands, and we build unaffordable housing for people. And what we've got now is we've got this debate about, and of course, if you explain that to the pupils at school, they'd say, oh, that sounds a bit strange, because we've heard that shouldn't you be building affordable housing for people? And you say, yeah, but there's some technical reasons we can't do that. It's to do with economics and finance. You wouldn't really understand that. But don't worry, because there are these other sites which haven't been approved yet, which we think we can build more affordable housing on. Now, one of those sites we're told, and I tend to find out from the media about this, even though it's in my constituency, the constituency that I've served for the last 13 years and I've grown up in, is that we see a headline that, and the minister yesterday said, oh, the old Lekeneve school is going to be housing. Is it? Where's the consultation been on that? I've certainly not heard that there's a desire from any of the local residents that that should be housing. And certainly it would need to go through that consultation process for that to be passed. I've heard that it could be used for community use. That's what I've always heard from the residents. I've even heard that there's one well-known community charity in Jersey which wants that as their hub in the West, so that they can serve the community, the very densely built up community in Llanelli, who I don't think would accept any more dense housing when they've had a school which has been a good neighbour on their doorstep for many decades, I think since the 60s. I don't think they'd take too kindly to some high density flats or residences being built there, whether they're affordable or not. So I would say don't believe that even if the will were there for these sites to be converted to housing tomorrow, that it'd be straightforward. Remember what happened with People's Park. It might be the grand scheme of somebody to put a massive building there, but it doesn't mean that it's politically acceptable to the local community or to the wider community even. So we carry on the explanation about what States of Jersey Development Company does. They build unaffordable homes for people. And what we're debating about today is how much unaffordable homes we should be building. Senator Mezek earlier thought we should limit the unaffordable homes to 50%. Now we're debating whether we should have only 70% unaffordable homes, or the maximum possible that the government, the Alliance Party, can manage is 85% unaffordable homes. Because of course, if a home isn't affordable, then it must be unaffordable. So we've got a government whose zenith of ambition for when it comes to tackling the housing bump or the housing hurdle or the housing crisis or the housing emergency, whatever you want to call it, and that they still can't seem to agree on what level of emergency they want to give it. At least they've acknowledged that it is a something. I'm sure they'll flesh that out before it comes to writing their manifestos. Their ambition is to have 85% unaffordable homes for people in Jersey, because somehow that's going to help. So it shows how low the bar has been set when this amendment can come in to ask to double the government ambition and to still have it set at 30% of affordability. It shows just how low this government are prioritising what I believe is a housing crisis that we have in Jersey today. And if it means, of course, like we've had speakers saying, I think I was going to call him the shadow housing minister, but he's actually the deputy of St. Peter, who takes a keen interest in housing, saying, well, this would delay it for a couple of years. We've had others saying that, well, first of all, that's your fault for putting the wrong plans in, which do not address sufficiently the crisis that we have. But secondly, in the grand scheme of things, these are homes that are going to be built. And whilst they exist in perpetuity, certainly for decades, potentially over 100 years, the debate that we have today sets the type of parameters for what kind of homes they will be. And if it means that new plans need to be submitted, new sums need to be worked out, then I'm quite comfortable if it means that there's going to be a short delay so that we can get decades of better value to serve the community that we live in and that hopefully we all love, sir. So I'm quite comfortable. I think even last week or the week before, the sitting before, I heard Deputy Luce, Deputy of St. Martin, saying, you know, I don't know why this isn't 100%. We should be setting our ambitions much higher, because this is states owned land effectively. This is public land. And if we're not building and maximising affordable homes on the land that we already have in front of us with planning applications going in, then why would we put our hopes on some future applications which we have no idea will be successful, viable, or politically acceptable to the population and the communities that they seek to be in? And I'll finish by saying, sir, because it does come back to Llanelli, the minister will have a fight on his hands if he thinks that Llanelli is going to be housing it without the consent of the local community. And as a current local representative for that area, I will make sure that they are fully engaged and that the views of the residents in the immediate area and the wider area are heard before any kind of plans or presupposition about what goes there should be made, sir. But I know that today we're talking about the two sites of South Hill and the waterfront, and that where possible, we should be maximising that to resolve and to help towards solving the housing emergency and the affordability thereof, which we have at the moment, sir. So I do urge members to vote for this. It's still modest, but it's something practical and tangible that we can do, because actions in this assembly speak much louder than words.
Thank you very much, Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to make a number of short observations on some of what's been said this afternoon. Senator Farnham says that we have plans to deal with population. Where are they? They keep on being kicked down the road. The Deputy for St Peter, who's leading this policy, tells us that it's an evolving policy and it will not be in a definitive form before the election. If population continues to rise, we will never have enough homes to meet housing needs, as the demand will be never ending. More and more people requires more and more houses, and then there's the need for more schools and infrastructure. Senator Farnham also said we are dealing with foreign direct investment, i.e. outside investors buying existing housing stock. We may have brought in a few restrictions on the waterfront, but what about a general policy restricting foreign investment unless they're adding to the housing stock by building new houses or apartment blocks? What about the investment in existing housing stock by wealthy residents, which also denies ordinary workers the ability to buy or rent properties? If they finance new properties, I welcome their investment, but not the current nature of their investments, which prevents those who have to work for a living getting a home. Also, if the government were really serious about dealing with the housing problem, why have they delayed the register of who owns commercial and residential property, which incidentally the Assembly passed a year ago last September? Such a register will give them the evidence with which to deal with the problem. I really don't think they're serious. I don't think some government ministers want to see such a register, as it will expose the real nature of the problem and who are benefiting from the existing housing crisis at the expense of the many. The register will not be in before the election, and I forecast it will be abandoned after it so that the status quo can continue. I also don't think that they're serious about dealing with landlords who are charging extortionate rents in many cases for woefully inadequate accommodation. But again, part of that is the number of landlords in the States Assembly who have a direct interest in high property values, which enables them to charge higher rents for their properties. I believe that we should cease seeing property as an investment, certainly government should be, and concentrate on what it should be, providing homes for the people of this island. We've heard much from the Treasury Minister saying, oh, it won't be economically viable. We're talking about our islanders, our people, and roofs over their heads and their ability to have a family and grow. It should not just be about money. Unfortunately, the government has no credibility, and they're following their predecessors down the same road, which is going nowhere. I found it rich to hear Senator Gorst saying we should also all be working together on this issue, and it should not be political, especially when he was the Chief Minister for 2 government terms and did next to nothing to alleviate the housing problem. I personally am fed up with the repeated excuses from successive governments, and so I will support this proposition. And again, to quote Deputy Lindsay Ash, who in the past quotes Churchill, we want action this day. And I ask States members to take some action this day and support the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputies. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? Honourable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I haven't managed to follow all of the contributions to this debate, but I have been listening to some of them, and As constable of the parish in which SOJDC want to concentrate their housing provision, I have to say that I'm quite alarmed by some of the speeches I've heard this afternoon. I heard Senator Moore providing a number of reasons why this proposition should be supported, and if I followed her correctly, she seemed to be arguing that there is a hope or a possibility that the hospital project might be turned down at the planning stage and we could build more houses, in that case up at Overdale. I heard Deputy Tadier talking about a number of things, including what can happen at Kennervay, the housing that can be provided there. And then we heard Deputy Higgins admitting quite openly that the reason he's going to support this proposition is because he's fed up with the government and successive governments. So members need to be under no illusions. If they want to solve the housing crisis, we have two schemes. One is ready to go at South Hill and the waterfront development ready to go into planning. The quickest way to solve the housing crisis is to enable the Jersey Development Company to get on and provide homes. They'll be providing homes at all levels, not just affordable, but homes for other people, so that the system that we have in Jersey can work. I believe they know what they're doing, and I think that we should let them get on with it. Any support for the proposition today will not speed up the process. It will delay the process, and people who are waiting for homes in St Helier will not thank the Island Assembly today if they support this proposition. I urge members to reject it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Conatab, Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. I wanted to come in and appreciate it is getting to that hour, sir, but I just want to try and address some of the remarks before we conclude for the evening. I think just to start initially, sir, let's be very clear. The information I have got is that if this vote goes through today, sir, in essence, the waterfront scheme will stop. And essentially, broadly speaking, 1,000 units will be delayed in their progress. Now, I think the Housing Minister actually said, sir, sorry, I'm just setting my timer, actually said earlier, which I absolutely endorse, that none of us, if we could do 30% on that site, we would do it. I was quite firm with officers, actually. For me, if we could go higher on that site and that difference in units makes it affordable, we would have brought an amendment. And I'm very clearly told that the whole planning guidance is against that. And that essentially you get into discussions around overshadowing and you name it, and it can't be done. Now that is an issue that we will have to address in the Bridging Island plan. That frankly, that height with the problems that we face will have to be grappled, because otherwise we will just keep going round and round in this circle. However, let's be really clear about time here. The planning application, obviously for South Hill, is in planning. The information I have been given, has been confirmed by a number of ministers, is that the planning application for the waterfront is due to go in before Christmas, i.e. next month. The planning policy is very, very clear. If one changes the scheme, one has to go to public consultation. And we've taken 2 years, and I understand it's cost around £2 million on each of the sites to produce the plans to date. And therefore, by essentially changing the scheme, changing the viability, which will then require essentially a redesign of the scheme, which is what this would arrive in, as I understand matters. You are delaying matters around 18 months, and that's why references to the plans being up in the air or whatever it is are wrong. It's been held back to allow this debate to take place. it is ready to go basically in the next couple of weeks. And equally, sir, in essence, the more one takes out, the whole point of the waterfront, it is a balance of uses, it's a balance of purposes that one's trying to achieve. And one of them, the Connaught of St Bernard's actually referenced it on the South Hill side. South Hill was always about getting value, because it's about getting value, because that money then can go into the housing development fund, or basically can go into affordable housing elsewhere. And really, really simplistically, if you can build a unit up there which you can sell for £1 million, that £1 million can go towards funding 3 units at 300,000, shall we say, of affordable housing or social housing, whatever it is, elsewhere. That's the differential. And that's why the waterfront was always about a balance of uses, because some of that value goes elsewhere. And the principle that previous assemblies laid down, and which no one has challenged to date, even former ministers who were in the position to do so, was that the returns from the waterfront would go into being invested in St Helier. And obviously what happens is, the more, absolutely understand the reason, but let's be really clear on the money front, the more you take out in terms of making it more shared equity than what we've got, or more social rental, whatever it is, means far less investment from the waterfront into St Helier, and I submit that St Helier needs that investment. So I'm just looking down my notes to make sure I've covered those pieces. Just to be clear, I think the question was asked about what gets delivered in terms of clearing the way by the Bridging Island plan. It all depends. The short answer is that if the sites are rezoned, or the policies are agreed in March next year, then they're agreed and available from that point. It's then in the hands of the developers to get them turned round within, if they can do them within the 4 years, and some developers are very perfectly capable of doing that, then you will get delivery by or before 2025. That is the principle. So it is enabling that development to take place. Deputy Tadyer, I was disappointed on 2 accounts with his speech. Number one is the comment about La Keneve sounded like don't build on my patch, and don't build on my patch which is actually already built on, which frankly, for those of us who don't want to see green fields rezoned, sounds a bit of a poor argument. Secondly, I also correct the deputy. The Regeneration Steering Group actually gave a direction to SOJDC in 2019 about not doing any more what we call external buy-to-let as a policy. So Senator Mesic brought his proposition in later, quite a lot later, but that's why we were very able to support it, so because we'd already actually, and I had already made that decision and we'd implemented it some time ago. I think we talk about hope. We've got to have hope, and that's about coming together and saying, as I said earlier, this is about having a very clear and calm discussion around how we resolve this. How we resolve this is by sorting out some of the very large other usages that we have within the states. And that, for example, as I said, office strategy is ticked now, taken 10 years. Hospital, subject to the planning permissions, that is advanced. And that means is why we've been able to give them the go-ahead on St Saviour's, for example, and then later on the Keneve. Putting those all together, you have various sites that can go into a pipeline, which is about addressing the supply. We will only sort this out by getting more supply into that process, into that pipeline, which then by addressing that, by then looking at some of the demand side, some of that has been done. There will be some measures being proposed, I hope in short order, which will also look at demand. And obviously in the longer term, what we do on population will also impact on the demand side. But you have to address both of those sides there. And one of the key things is supply. What this does, as I said, will delay supply of 1,000 units, probably by around 18 months, if not longer. And will affect the viability. That's a matter for this assembly, but for me, the message that it would send out is actually this assembly, led by the Reform Party, does not want to build 1,000 units of all measures, including shared equity, including for downsizing, including for first-time buyers. It does not want to see a quality waterfront in St Helier, which has been criticised so many times for being poor on what should be an absolute world-class vista, i.e. the views over St Omans Bay, etc. And actually, sir, hopefully we will be adjourning soon. Hopefully we can give some indications of the type of prices that we're talking about. But it's therefore, sir, it is not as bleak in terms of only being available to highly wealthy non-islanders buying on the site, sir. And I think to suggest that is perhaps misrepresenting the position. This is a scheme, sir, for St Helier. It has been worked on with the public for 2 years. This is not about, in mind, and I've seen all sides of the argument, sir, in relation to the waterfront and SOJC during my 16 years. I am comfortable with the scheme that we have got in front of us. And I do think, sir, it will contribute, as I've said, 1,000 units to the pipeline that we need. We have other schemes in the pipeline as well. So actually, there are thousands of units that will be brought forward over the next 10 years that will help islanders and should give them hope. But how we communicate that is also important. And actually, sir, allowing it to get into the planning process, into the development process and being built will actually help it rather than delaying things. I think, sir, I should stop there. I reiterate, sir, from my perspective on all the information I'm given, if this proposition is accepted, sir, it is very, very, very likely to cause significant delays, probably on both schemes, and certainly on the information I've got, very, very much on the waterfront scheme, sir. Thank you. And I therefore do not recommend that as a decision for the Assembly, but it will be for members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Is the adjournment proposed? Very well, the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.